The key lay in a white envelope between Nora Hale and two strangers who already hated her. It was an ordinary brass key, dulled around the teeth, with bells stamped into a cracked green tag. Through the estate attorney's second-floor window, Nora could see the place it opened, a narrow brick cafe across from Millbrook's abandoned rail depot, its windows papered from the inside, its awning bleached almost gray. "Mr. Bell left you the building and its contents," the attorney said, "as well as the apartment above it." Nora looked from the key to the dead man's daughter. Celia Bell Mercer sat rigidly in a navy coat. One gloved hand closed around the other. Beside her, Grant Bell had the broad, red face of someone trying not to raise his voice in a professional office. "Our mother built that cafe," Celia said. "I didn't ask him for it. That's supposed to help?" Grant shoved back from the table. "We're challenging the will." The attorney began saying something about procedure, but Nora barely heard him. 8 months of Sunday night coffee, overcooked eggs, and tips so small they felt sarcastic. And Elias Bell had left her a shuttered cafe his own children believed belonged to them. Celia stared at Nora as if she had stolen something from a grave. Then she said, very quietly, "What did you make him think you were?" 8 months earlier, Nora's manager switched off half the diner lights at 10:45 and called it atmosphere. "It's a visual cue," Barry said, tying a trash bag. "People see dim lights. They understand we're closing. People see dim lights. They think we're trying to hide the roaches. We don't have roaches. Then why are we hiding them?" Barry gave her the patient look he used when deciding whether she was joking. It was one of Nora's few reliable pleasures at work. Outside, freezing rain rattled against the windows of the Millbrook diner. The red neon sign buzzed over an empty parking lot, turning every puddle the color of cough syrup. Nora had already wiped the pie case, counted the register twice, and told the grill cook he could go. Barry was dragging the last bag of trash toward the back when the front door opened. The man who entered brought a gust of wet air with him. He was tall in the defeated way older men sometimes were, as though gravity had won an argument, but not the war. His tan raincoat was dark at the shoulders, silver hair clung to his forehead, and water shone on the rims of his glasses. "We're closing," Nora said. He looked at the clock above the pie case. The clock said 10:49. He looked back at Nora. "Door says 11. We started closing at 10:30 this month." "Door says 11. It also says voted best breakfast in Warren County, and nobody's been able to prove that." Barry appeared from the hallway, still holding the trash bag. He smiled the way managers smiled when the customer was wrong, but had arrived before the posted closing time. "Have a seat, sir. Nora will take care of you." Nora turned to stare at him. Barry handed her the trash bag. "Visual cue," he whispered, then disappeared into the back. The man chose the booth farthest from the door. Of course he did. Nora carried the trash bag to the kitchen, washed her hands, and retrieved the coffee pot. The remaining coffee had been sitting on the burner since 9:30. It had passed through beverage and entered a harsher state of matter. She brought it anyway. The man peered into the cup after she poured. "When was this made?" "During the Carter administration." He looked up at her over his glasses. "I can make fresh. That would be appropriate." Nora took the cup before she said something that would require another employment search. She had conducted 4 of those in 3 years and was tired of describing herself as dependable to men who changed the schedule every Thursday. The diner settled into its nighttime noises. Ice tapped the glass. The soda machine hummed. In the kitchen, the old refrigerator gave a violent shudder, then resumed doing whatever it considered refrigeration. Nora measured grounds into the basket, not the regular amount, 1 scoop less. The man had the air of someone who would call strong coffee bitter and weak coffee insulting, and she resented wasting good grounds on a no-win situation. When she returned, he had taken off his raincoat and folded it beside him. His shirt collar was buttoned, though he wore no tie. A pale groove circled his ring finger. She poured. He tasted it. "This is weak." There it was. Nora set the pot down. "I could insult you for free if that's what you drove through an ice storm for." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. More like his face had considered one and rejected the expense. "What's left to eat?" "Pie." "What kind?" "Apple." "Any good?" "No." He glanced toward the covered pie case. "Bring me a slice." The last slice had broken at the point when Nora moved it earlier. She could have thrown it onto a plate and let it arrive looking like a traffic accident. Instead, she warmed it, tucked the broken piece against the crust, and added a spoonful of whipped cream over the damage. Her mother used to call that hiding the body. She carried it out with a fork. The man studied the plate. You said it wasn't good. I'm protecting myself from expectations. He took a bite, chewed, took another. Nora began wiping the counter again, though it was already clean. Through the pass-through window, she could see Barry putting on his jacket. You okay alone? He called. I've got a fork. The customer kept eating. Barry pointed at the clock and mouthed, Lock up. Nora nodded. The back door banged, leaving her alone with a late customer. A weak pot of fresh coffee, and weather that had gotten meaner while nobody was watching. The man's hands trembled slightly when he lifted the cup. He seemed annoyed by them. He steadied the saucer with 2 fingers and caught Nora noticing. Cold, he said. I didn't ask. No. You stared. She folded the dish towel into a square. You always this friendly? Only when served poor coffee. Good. I was worried this was personal. That almost smile threatened again. He finished the pie completely, including a small flake of crust he pressed onto the fork with one blunt fingertip. Nora recognized that gesture. Her mother had done it with the last bite of anything she had not paid for herself, unwilling to leave even a crumb of a gift. The recognition made Nora less irritated, which irritated her further. She dropped the check beside his hand. No rush, but if you take too long, I'm turning you into tomorrow's soup. He read the total. $4.86 for pie. It's artisanal. It came out of a freezer. The freezer has an artist's soul. He removed a worn brown wallet from his pocket and placed a $5 bill on the check. Then he stood, slid into his raincoat, and buttoned it carefully. Nora looked at the nickel and 9 pennies he had left behind. Don't spend it all in one place, he said. I don't think I can spend it in any place. He walked toward the door. Up close, she saw how gray he looked. Not his hair, his skin. The color beneath it seemed to have thinned. He paused with his hand on the door bar and gazed out at the frozen parking lot. Where's your car? Nora asked, across the road. There was nothing across the road except the closed feed store and a dark bus shelter. You came by bus? I'm aware of how I arrived. The last county bus was at 10:20. He pushed the door open. Wind slapped it back hard enough to shake the glass. Nora caught the edge before it struck him. You planning to walk somewhere? My plans aren't your concern. Great. Then stand here while I call you a cab for reasons unrelated to concern. I don't need a cab. The sidewalk is ice. I've walked on ice before. So, have a lot of people with hip replacements. He gave her a look sharp enough to peel paint, but he stepped away from the door. The only cab company still operating in Millbrook said 40 minutes. Nora called the number again, hoping a different dispatcher might produce a different universe. The same woman answered and reduced the estimate to 35 out of spite. Nora hung up. The man had returned to the booth. I could have been halfway home. You'd be halfway to the ground. She locked the front door and switched off the neon sign. Then she noticed his wet cuffs. You want a towel? No. Heat's better near the counter. I'm fine here. Your hands are shaking. They do that. The admission arrived so flatly that Nora pretended she had not heard it. She brought him another cup of coffee. Better this time, because she had stopped trying to punish him. He drank without comment. For several minutes, neither spoke. Nora completed the closing list. Napkin holders, syrups, floor, register. Each task had to be initialed in Barry's little squares, as if someday a congressional committee might investigate whether Table 6 had received adequate ketchup. The man watched her turn chairs upside down on tables. You missed that booth, he said. You're sitting in it, the booth behind me. She looked. A single paper napkin lay under the table. I was saving it for my retirement. You're too young to be that tired. Nora crouched to retrieve the napkin. You're too old to be out after your bus stops running. He looked into his coffee. Point to Nora. When she straightened, his attention had moved to the pie case. A small handwritten card stood inside it. Nora's apple pie, $4.86. Barry had added her name after customers kept complimenting it, though all Nora did was improve the frozen filling with lemon peel, cinnamon, and salt. Calling it hers, let the diner charge an extra $1. You make it? The man asked. Depends. Are you about to complain? You use too much cinnamon, then no. The crust isn't yours. No. Filling? Mostly. He nodded once, as if this confirmed something unflattering. Where'd you learn? My mother, she cooked professionally. Nora moved the spray bottle to the next table. She had a catering business. Had? The word was small. Its edge was not. Nora sprayed the table too hard. Cleaner splashed her wrist. It closed. Why? Because businesses close, usually for reasons. Usually those reasons aren't discussed with strangers who leave 14-cent tips. 9 cents and a nickel, I stand corrected. He reached for the check, turned it over, and took a pen from inside his coat. For one foolish second, Nora thought he might add a proper tip. He wrote something on the back instead. Restaurants fail from waste, pride, poor location, bad math, family, or some combination, he said. People like to blame the economy because the economy doesn't sit across from them at Thanksgiving. Nora stopped wiping. Her mother's business had failed from illness, missed deadlines, 2 clients who paid late, 1 client who never paid, and Nora insisting they could save it long after the numbers said otherwise. But there had also been pride, bad math, family. He had thrown 5 stones in the dark and hit 4 windows. You get all that wisdom from buying frozen pie? She asked. No. I got it from owning a cafe. He slid the check toward her. On the back, he had written Elias Bell in cramped block letters, followed by a phone number. If you ever decide you want to learn why yours failed, he said, call somebody else. Nora stared at the number. Then why write this? My cab's outside. Headlights swept across the dark windows. Elias stood, leaving his empty cup and the 14 cents exactly where they were. Nora unlocked the door for him. The driver hurried around to help, but Elias waved him off and crossed the icy pavement with stubborn, careful steps. Before getting into the cab, he looked back at the diner, not at Nora, at the building. His expression was so nakedly sad that she glanced away, embarrassed to have caught him without his armor. Then the cab carried him into the freezing rain. Nora finished mopping, threw his number in the trash, and told herself she would not have called him anyway. The following Sunday, at precisely 10:49, the front door opened. Elias Bell walked in, shook the rain from his coat, and said, "Coffee any better tonight?" Nora looked at the clock, then at the booth farthest from the door. "Tip any better tonight?" "No, then neither is the coffee." He hung his coat beside the booth as though it had always been his. "Eggs," he said. "Grill's off. Turn it on." That's not how closing works. That's exactly how a grill works. Nora took the coffee pot from beneath the brewer and held it up to the light. "This is last week's. I expected as much." She poured him a cup. The coffee was fresh. She had made it at 10:45. Elias tasted it, frowned, and added 1 packet of sugar. Marginal improvement. You practicing to be buried without mourners? Scrambled, dry, wheat toast. Nora leaned one hand on the table. "Are you confused about the grill? The eggs come from the kitchen. How you achieve that is your business." In the kitchen, a single burner remained on beneath a pot of soup. Nora could scramble 2 eggs in a sauté pan, but doing so would reward behavior she wanted eliminated from the earth. She scrambled 3. When she set the plate down, Elias examined the toast first. "You buttered it. Call the police." "I don't like butter." "Then scrape it off." He did, using the side of his fork with such grim concentration that Nora had to turn away before he caught her smiling. Barry emerged from the back, carrying the register drawer. He stopped when he saw the plate. "Kitchen closes at 10:30, he said. "I'm aware," Nora said. Elias lifted his fork. "She threatened me." "I believe you." Barry carried the drawer to the office. He had the rare managerial gift of recognizing trouble and leaving it entirely with the hourly employee. Elias ate the eggs. Nora wiped tables around him. When he finished, he placed $6 beside the $5 check. "A whole dollar," Nora said. "I should have put your name in lights. The toast was poor. You scraped the good part off." He put on his coat and walked to the bus shelter without accepting help. Nora watched until the bus arrived. The next Sunday, he came at 10:38. The Sunday after that, 10:22. He never mentioned arriving earlier, but each week he appeared before Nora shut down one more piece of the kitchen. She began leaving the grill on without admitting it was for him. Elias varied his order just enough to suggest he was testing both her patience and the inventory. Meatloaf with no gravy, tuna melt with the cheese under the tuna, soup, but not if it came from a bag. "It comes in a bucket," Nora told him. "That's worse. It's the same soup. A bag has the decency to hide what it is." He ordered it anyway. He always sat in the back booth, always faced the door, and always paid in cash from the worn brown wallet. His tips rose slowly from 14 cents to 50, then fell to a quarter after Nora served his meatloaf with gravy touching one edge. She began keeping a row of his coins beneath the register. Barry found them while searching for receipt tape. "What's this?" "My retirement." "You're at $3.12. It's a conservative plan." Barry swept the coins into her hand. "Take your tips home. We're not a bank." Neither, Nora thought, was she. Banks had money. Her room above Larkentire took almost half her monthly pay and supplied a persistent smell of rubber at no extra charge. The stairs ran along the outside of the building, iron steps slick with frost and summer grease. Her landlord, Mr. Larkin, had promised to fix the loose railing before Nora moved in. That had been 14 months ago. Now they both treated the promise as a local legend. The room contained a bed, a hot plate, a narrow shower, and one window overlooking stacks of used tires. Nora kept Elias's coins in a chipped cereal bowl beside the sink. She told herself she was saving them because spending 37 cents at a time was inconvenient. By February, the bowl held $6.84. Elias missed the first Sunday of the month. Nora brewed the 10:45 coffee anyway. When Barry asked why, she said the old coffee smelled flammable. At 10:50, she turned off the grill. At 10:58, a pickup pulled into the lot, and she experienced an embarrassing lift of relief until two college-age men got out. Barry met them at the door and pointed to the hours. Nora poured the untouched coffee down the drain with more force than necessary. Elias returned the following Sunday carrying a stainless steel thermos. "You're late," Nora said. "It's 10:30. You were supposed to be here last week." He took off his coat. "Was I?" "No, but you usually are. That sounds like your problem." She noticed that his cheeks had hollowed slightly. A purple bruise marked the back of one hand, half hidden beneath his cuff. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Nothing got you pretty good." He tucked the hand beneath the table. "I had tests." "What kind?" "The private kind." She waited, but his face had closed. The thermos stood on the table between them, old but polished, with a black plastic handle and two shallow dents in its side. "You bring your own coffee now?" she asked. "It's for you." Nora looked at him. "I have one. You have paper cups." "Which work." "They leak heat and taste like glue." "So does our coffee. It's a complete experience." He nudged the thermos toward her. "Take it or throw it away." There was no wrapping, no card, nothing that would turn the object into a gesture they might have to discuss. Nora unscrewed the lid. The inside smelled faintly of coffee and something sweeter, like vanilla. "You steal this from a church basement?" "My wife used it." The answer changed the air so quickly Nora wished she had made another joke before it arrived. She looked again at the pale groove around his ring finger. What was her name? Ruth. Did she know you gave terrible gifts? She considered it one of my better qualities. The corner of his mouth moved, but this time the almost smile failed for a different reason. Nora tightened the lid. "Thank you? I said you could throw it away." "And I said thank you. You say too much. You come here voluntarily." Elias looked toward the dark window. "I'm reconsidering." He ordered meatloaf. Nora kept the gravy separate without asking. The thermos came to work with her after that. She filled it before every shift and carried it up the iron stairs at night, warm against her palm. On Sundays, Elias checked to see if she had it, but never acknowledged it directly. Their conversations developed rules. Elias could ask about Nora's mother, as long as he did not sound sympathetic. Nora could ask about Ruth, as long as the question involved food. Neither could ask what Elias's tests were for. Neither had agreed to any of this. "Your mother's catering business," he said one night. "How large?" "Why?" "Curiosity." "You make curiosity sound like a tax audit. How large?" "At the best point." 6 employees, weddings, office lunches, anniversary parties. One funeral where the widow complained the deviled eggs were too cheerful. Elias considered that. "What makes an egg cheerful?" "Paprika, apparently." "And you worked there?" "After high school, then full-time." "Doing what?" "Everything." "That means nothing. It means prep, deliveries, orders, invoices, cleanup. I handled clients when Mom was sick." "What kind of sick?" Nora brought his plate down harder than she meant to. The silverware jumped. "None of your business. You brought it up." "No, you walked into it." Elias glanced at the plate. Turkey on rye, mustard, pickle, no onions. He had sent back the onions twice before Nora stopped pretending she forgot. You said the business failed, he said. You didn't say she did. She didn't. Where is she? Arizona. Why? Because my aunt has a house there, and Ohio winters were making things worse. And you stayed. I'm 27. I'm allowed. I didn't say you weren't. His restraint irritated Nora more than an accusation would have. I stayed because somebody had to close the accounts, sell what we could, finish the jobs people had deposits on. By the time that was done, my aunt's spare room wasn't available, and I'd found this highly prestigious career. She gestured toward the diner with both hands. A ceiling light flickered on cue. Elias ate half his sandwich before speaking again. Why didn't you start over? Nora laughed once. With what? You know the work. I knew our work. What's the difference? Money, for one, a kitchen, clients, a functioning vehicle, the ability to hear the phrase non-refundable deposit without breaking into a rash. You could cook somewhere better than this. Every cook in that kitchen makes less than I do, because they're not good, because Barry's cheap. Both can be true. Nora refilled his cup. You know, most people pay extra for career counseling this unpleasant. You'd waste your money. Luckily, I don't have any. Elias's gaze moved to her shoes. The black non-slip soles had begun to separate at the toes. Nora had glued the right one twice. She shifted her feet under the counter. He noticed that too. The next Sunday he brought a folded newspaper with 3 job listings circled in blue ink. Nora dropped it on his table without unfolding it. No, you didn't read them. I read the gesture. Kitchen manager at a retirement community, pastry prep at the hotel, assistant baker at, no. You said you needed money. I didn't ask you to find it for me. You prefer complaining? I prefer not having a man who tips and nickels decide my life. Elias folded the paper along its original crease. Then decide it yourself. I did. This? He glanced around the diner. This is what you decided? The question landed where it was meant to. Nora felt the impact in her face before she could hide it. She picked up his untouched menu. Kitchen's closed. It's 10:15. Visual cue. Elias studied her for a long moment. Then he put the newspaper inside his coat, buttoned it, and left without ordering. Nora expected him back the following Sunday. Men like Elias enjoyed being forgiven without having to apologize. He did not come. He stayed away the next week, too. On the 3rd Sunday, Barry tried to close the front door, and the lower hinge tore loose from the frame. The heavy glass sagged toward the sidewalk, leaving a wedge of icy air along the floor. Barry swore, pushed a bus tub beneath the door to support it, and taped a handwritten, "Use other door" sign to the glass. We only have one door, Nora said. It tells them the situation is serious. It tells them we're trapped. Barry promised to call a repairman in the morning and went home. Nora wore her coat behind the counter and listened to the heater fail against the draft. At 10:41, Elias appeared outside. He stood beneath the red neon, reading Barry's sign. Then he looked through the glass at Nora. She considered pretending not to see him. Elias tugged once on the crooked door, crouched to inspect the hinge, and walked back into the parking lot. Nora told herself good riddance. 5 minutes later, he returned carrying a red metal toolbox. You have screws? He asked through the gap. You have an apology? No. Then I guess we both came unprepared. He set down the toolbox, removed his raincoat, and lay flat on the freezing tile to examine the hinge. Nora watched his good shirt collect grit from beneath the door. What are you doing? Deciding something myself. He held out one hand. After a moment, Nora gave him the thermos. He looked at it, offended. Screwdriver, he said. She smiled for the first time in 3 Sundays and reached into his toolbox. The Phillips. That's a flathead. Other one. This? That's a wrench. You said screwdriver. I assumed basic visual recognition. Nora held up the flathead. This is a screwdriver. For the wrong screw. You know, the door was broken in a much more peaceful way before you got here. Elias pushed himself onto one elbow and reached for the Phillips. His hand shook as he fitted it into the hinge. The tool slipped twice before he got it seated. Nora crouched beside him. Up close, she could see the strain around his mouth. I can do that. So can I. You're lying on a floor where somebody dropped coleslaw in 2009, then stopped talking so I can leave sooner. He tried to turn the screw. His wrist trembled harder, rattling the screwdriver against the metal. Nora took the tool from him. Elias looked at her. "You can supervise," she said. "You seem gifted." He sat up slowly and leaned against the doorframe. Nora loosened the screws while he instructed her not to strip them. Lose them, bend the plate, or breathe recklessly near the glass. The hinge had pulled free because the wood behind it had split. Elias found a longer screw in his toolbox, then cut 2 thin pieces from a coffee stirrer and wedged them into the damaged hole. "That cannot possibly be an approved building method," Nora said. "It's a diner. Nothing here is an approved building method." He had her lift the door while he aligned the plate. She braced one foot against the frame and pushed with her shoulder. "Higher," he said. "It weighs 100 pounds. Then use 101 pounds. I liked you better when you were gone." "No, you didn't." The answer came without a trace of humor. Nora looked down at him. Elias kept his attention on the hinge. She raised the door another 1/4 inch. He drove the longer screw through the plate and into solid wood. When Nora eased her weight away, the door stayed level. Elias tested it twice, opening and closing it with one hand. "There," he said. "Look at that. You are useful. Don't spread it around." He gathered his tools, moving carefully now. Getting off the floor took him longer than he wanted Nora to notice. She pretended to examine the hinge until he was upright. A streak of black grime ran from his shoulder blade to the hem of his shirt. "Your back's filthy. So is your floor. I don't lie down on it. You should. You might see what you miss with the mop." Nora wet a clean towel and held it out. Elias looked at the towel, then at the place behind his shoulder he could not reach. "No," he said. "It's either me or you ride the bus looking like you lost a fight with a chimney. I'll wear my coat, fine." She tossed the towel onto the counter. Elias put on the coat, concealing the grime with his dignity mostly intact. He lifted the toolbox. "Coffee?" Nora asked. "The grill closed? It can make an exception." "I was told that isn't how closing works. I've been overruled by maintenance." He returned to his booth. Nora cooked his eggs without buttering the toast. She added 1 extra slice because fixing the door was worth more than $1 and less uncomfortable than saying so. Elias noticed. "I didn't order 3. Third one's structural. He ate all of it." When he left, Nora found exact payment beneath the plate. No tip at all. Under the cup was the folded newspaper with the job listings. This time, the hotel position had been crossed out. Beside the assistant baker listing, Elias had written, "Better hours. Still poor pay. Your decision." Nora took it home. She did not apply. She also did not throw it away. On Sunday, Elias asked if she had called. "No?" "Fine." "You don't sound fine. I don't care." "You don't sound like that either." He opened the menu. "What's the special?" "Meatloaf." 2 words. "What?" "Meatloaf is 2 words. Not on our menu." "Your menu is wrong. I'll alert the newspapers." He set the menu down. "Did you at least examine the position?" "No." A muscle moved in his jaw. Nora filled his coffee before he could say anything. "You were right." Elias blinked. She had learned that agreement disoriented him more effectively than argument. "About what?" "This isn't what I decided." "Not exactly." He waited. "I decided to stay until Mom's business was finished. Then I decided to stay until I had enough money to go somewhere else. Then the transmission died, so I decided to stay until I replaced the car. After that, the security deposit here became the security deposit at Mr. Larkin's, and now I make decisions 1 utility bill at a time. That isn't unusual. No, it's not. Unusual is overrated. So, is advice. I didn't advise you. You circled my future in blue pen. I circled 3 mediocre jobs. And now? Now I assume you prefer this mediocre job." Nora leaned against the end of the booth. "I'm good at it. That's a dangerous reason to stay somewhere." The sentence landed more gently than the last one had. Nora considered him over the coffee pot. "What were you good at?" she asked. "Being right." "Past tense? I'm working on humility. You should ask for your money back." Elias looked toward the pie case where the little card still claimed Nora's apple pie. "I kept accounts, vendors, repairs. Ruth handled the kitchen." "At your cafe?" "Yes." "What was it called?" He gave her a tired look. "Bells." Nora thought of the surname he had written on the back of the check the first night. Then she thought of the old green awning near the rail depot, the paper-covered windows, the painted bell above a door no one used. Bell's Cafe? There weren't enough bells in town to confuse it with another. My mother used to take me there. Elias went still. After big catering jobs, Nora continued, usually when she was too tired to cook, which made no sense because she'd been cooking all day. We'd sit at the counter. There was a pie case that turned around. It rotated. That's what turning around means. It was a display motor. It squeaked. Everything squeaked. Nora could see it now. The chrome edge of the counter, dark green stools, pies revolving behind curved glass. Her mother removing her shoes beneath the counter and flexing her feet where no one could see. A woman with red hair refilling their coffee and calling everyone honey, though perhaps memory had supplied the red hair from somewhere else. You had chicken soup, Nora said. Most cafes do, with wide noodles and too much black pepper. Ruth liked pepper. The rolls came in a basket with those paper liners, red checks. Nora smiled. Mom stole one once. A roll? The liner. Why? She wanted to find the pattern. She was going to order them for the catering business, but the supply company only sold a case of 10,000. Elias's thumb moved along the rim of his cup. Ruth bought the 10,000. I guess that explains why you had them every time. We still had 6 cases when we closed. His voice had changed on the last word. Nora heard the door shut inside it. Why did you close? Because we stopped opening. That's not a reason. It's sufficient. It's the kind of answer you complain about when I give it. Yes. She waited. He drank his coffee. What happened to Ruth? Nora asked. The cup stopped halfway to the saucer. Nora knew at once she had broken one of their rules, though neither had ever stated this one. Elias set the cup down, with care. She died, I figured. Then why ask? Because you say her name like she might walk in and correct you. For a moment he looked furious. Then the anger loosened around the edges, leaving something worse underneath. She corrected everyone, he said. He took cash from his wallet and placed it on the table without waiting for the check. Nora stepped aside as he put on his coat. I wasn't trying to. Yes, you were. He walked out. Nora watched him cross toward the bus shelter. The rain had stopped, but the street shone black beneath the lamps. In the opposite direction, 3 blocks past the feed store, the top of Belle's faded awning was just visible between buildings. She had passed it hundreds of times without thinking about what remained inside. Elias stood under the shelter, shoulders hunched, his toolbox absent tonight, his hands deep in his pockets. The bus was late. He did not turn around. Nora poured his cold coffee into the sink. The following Sunday, she put apple pie in front of him before he ordered. What's this? He asked. A peace offering. I didn't request peace. It's not on the menu. He examined the slice. Crust still isn't yours. Eat it or wear it. He took a bite. Too much cinnamon. You came back to say that? I came back because the bus stopped here. The bus also stops by the pharmacy. They serve a terrible cobbler. Elias ate another bite. Nora waited until half the slice was gone. I'm sorry about Ruth. His fork paused, then continued through the filling. Don't be. You didn't kill her. Comforting people really isn't your thing. Being comforted isn't mine. Yeah, I noticed. The pie case hummed behind the counter. Its motor had begun making a high whine that Barry claimed he could not hear. Nora wiped a ring of coffee from the table. You ever think about reopening? No, that was fast. It was an easy question. Could someone else? Someone else who? I don't know. You said you still have paper liners. 6 cases of obsolete paper aren't a business plan. You have a building, kitchen. I have walls and appliances that haven't run in years. People remember it. People remember being younger. They confuse that with liking where they ate. Nora pulled out the seat across from him and sat, something she never did with customers. What if it was good? It was good. There was no hesitation in his answer. Then why let it sit there? Elias placed his fork beside the unfinished crust. Because restaurants are graves dug with teaspoons. The line sounded old, not rehearsed for Nora, but repeated to himself until it had hardened. You don't believe that, she said. I own the grave. He stood and left a $5 bill on the table. The check was $4.86. Nora looked at the 14-cent tip, the same as the first night, and understood it was not an insult this time. It was a door he had opened exactly as far as he could manage. Nora put the 14 cents into the cereal bowl with the others. The bowl had begun to look less like savings and more like evidence. Nickels, dimes, pennies, and the occasional quarter covered the faded blue flower at the bottom. Elias could have tipped in bills. He carried them. Instead, he measured out coins with the severity of a pharmacist, adjusting each Sunday according to offenses only he understood. Nora began adjusting his meals in return. One week, his toast arrived cut diagonally. He deducted a dime. The next, she cut it into 4 small squares. He left an extra nickel, which she took as proof that spite could be monetized. He started arriving with tasks, a loose handle from his kitchen drawer, a grocery list he claimed was perfectly legible, a bank statement whose small print he could not read because he had forgotten his glasses, though his glasses were on his face. "You want me to tell you what you spent at the pharmacy?" Nora asked. "I want you to read the line." "That's what the line says." Louder. She read it louder. "Not so the whole room can hear. The whole room is Barry watching a game with the sound off." At the counter, Barry raised one hand without looking away from the television. Elias folded the statement. "You enjoy being difficult. Somebody has to carry the conversation." He brought her a jar of pickled beets the next Sunday. Nora held the jar to the light. "Is this a threat?" "Ruth made them. Ruth died 6 years ago. Those aren't 6 years old. You could have started with that. A woman at the Lutheran church uses Ruth's recipe. Do I look Lutheran? You look underfed." Nora set the jar beneath the counter. The beets were gone in 3 days. By April, the freezing rain had become ordinary rain, and the snow along the parking lot shrank into gray islands of gravel and cigarette filters. Elias switched from his heavy coat to a brown windbreaker. Without the bulk, he looked thinner than Nora expected. His belts had begun doing more work. He still answered questions about his health with silence or insult. Nora learned to ask sideways. "Your tests still private?" "Extremely." "Should I be charging them rent?" "They've been sitting at my table for months. They can afford your prices." Some nights he ate everything. Other nights he pushed food around until it looked diminished. Nora stopped serving him full portions and started putting the rest in a takeout box before she brought the plate. Elias pretended not to notice. He always took the box. He did not bring up bells again. Nora did. "Did you serve breakfast all day?" "Yes." "Bad decision." "It kept the lights on." "You just said restaurants are graves. Graves require lighting." "Did Ruth make the pies?" "Some." "Who made the others?" "People who worked there." "You know, for a man obsessed with reasons, you're not big on details." Elias separated the layers of his tuna melt with a fork. "What do you want to know?" Nora had no single answer. Bells had lodged behind her thoughts. She pictured the rotating pie case when she filled the diner's stationary one. She pictured red check paper beneath every roll. The cafe had become one of those half-remembered rooms from her earlier life, where her mother was tired but not yet sick, where bills existed without having swallowed everything. "What color was the kitchen?" she asked. "White. Every kitchen's white." "Then why ask?" "What color were the walls under the grease?" "Also white. Ruth should have handled decorating." "She did. She chose white." Nora smiled. "I like her. She would have found you exhausting. You came every Sunday for 6 months. I find you exhausting." "Exactly." Elias folded his napkin beside the plate. It was the closest he came to laughing. He was late the next week. At 11, Nora locked the door. Barry had gone, and a warm wind moved napkins around the parking lot. She carried the trash to the dumpster, came back through the front, and saw Elias standing across the street. He was not at the bus shelter. He stood beneath the awning of the closed feed store, facing east toward Bell's Cafe. Nora watched from inside. He made no move toward the diner. After a minute, she grabbed her jacket and the thermos. The air smelled of wet asphalt and soil. Nora crossed the empty road. "You lost?" "No. Diner's over there." "I know. Food's also over there. Booth, coffee, most of our chairs." "I had an appointment." "At night?" It ran long. Nora looked in the direction he was staring. Bell's sat 3 blocks away, its papered windows dull under a street lamp. "What appointment?" "The private kind. Your private life is getting crowded." Elias put his hands into his windbreaker pockets. "Bus is due in 12 minutes. It stops in front of the diner. It stops here, too." There was no sign, but arguing about county transit with him seemed like a poor use of spring. Nora unscrewed the thermos and poured coffee into the cup lid. She offered it. Elias looked at the cup. "Is that sanitary? It was your wife's. It's yours now." "Then no." He took it. They stood beneath the feed store awning while he drank. Bells remained at the edge of Nora's sight. "You go inside?" she asked. "No." "When was the last time?" I don't remember. That meant he remembered exactly. Do you still have the key? Elias handed the cup back. I have all my keys. You could show me. No. I'm not asking for a tour of the White House. I want to see a rotating pie case. It doesn't rotate. Because it's off. Because the motor broke in 2014. You remember when the pie case stopped, but not when you entered the building? He stepped from beneath the awning. The bus isn't here. I've changed stops. Nora followed him. He walked toward Belle's. She did not point out that he was going the wrong direction for home. Elias's shoulders were stiff, his pace unnecessarily brisk. At the first corner, the light changed before they reached it. He ignored the red signal and crossed the empty street. You're going to get hit by a car, Nora called. Then I'll miss the bus. That'll show them. Up close, the cafe looked worse. One corner of the awning had torn loose and sagged over the front window. Water stains darkened the brick beneath a clogged gutter. Someone had taped brown paper inside the glass, but the tape had failed in places, leaving curled gaps. Elias stopped at the door. The painted bell above it was barely visible, only a green curve and the chipped gold outline of a clapper. Nora wiped moisture from the glass with her sleeve and peered through a gap in the paper. She saw the chrome counter. The stools had been turned upside down on top of it, their green vinyl seats split and pale at the seams. Dust covered the floor. At the far end stood the pie case, motionless and empty. It's smaller, Nora said. Buildings don't shrink. Memories do bad measurements. Elias took a ring of keys from his pocket. Nora waited. He separated one brass key from the others. It had a cracked green tag. His thumb rested against it, but he did not put it in the lock. Want me to? Nora asked. No. His voice had gone rough. She looked through the glass again, giving him privacy without leaving. Behind the counter, a square opening framed the dark kitchen. On the wall beside it hung a clock stopped at 2:17. My mother and I sat right there once. Nora pointed through the glass. Third stool from the end. You can't know that. The second one rocked. Mom switched seats with me because it was driving her crazy. Fourth stool rocked, then fourth. Elias almost corrected her again. Instead, he put the keys back into his pocket. Why keep it? Nora asked. He stared at the papered window. I tried to sell, he said. Nora turned to him. Twice. First time, the buyer wanted the lot and not the building. Second wanted to gut it. I refused both, which was foolish. Then the roof began leaking. So foolish became expensive. You could repair it. I could also set money on fire in the parking lot. At least the cafe comes with pie. No pie. I know someone. You know frozen crust. I know you ate it. Elias looked at the third or fourth stool, whichever had rocked. Ruth got sick in February, he said. We stayed open. Nora did not move. She told customers it was her back. Told the staff it was gallbladder. Told me the doctor wasn't worried. She had a different lie for everybody. What was it? He shook his head once. The exact illness was another locked door. She worked until she couldn't, he said. Afterward, people came around with casseroles and opinions. Celia wanted to reopen by summer. Grant wanted new equipment. Everyone had a plan for the room where his mouth closed. Nora looked at the dark square of the kitchen. She died in there? Elias's face hardened at once. Bus. He turned away. There was no bus, not yet. But Nora let him walk. They reached the diner as headlights appeared at the end of the street. Elias boarded without saying goodnight. Nora stood at the curb with the thermos in one hand and watched him choose a seat without looking back. The next Sunday, he criticized the soup. The Sunday after that, the coffee. Then the temperature of the plate. Nora understood the rhythm. He had shown her something, and now he had to prove it had meant nothing. She absorbed it until May, when he sent back eggs that were exactly as dry as he always ordered. What's wrong with them? She asked. They're overcooked. You asked for dry. I don't ask for rubber. She took the plate to the kitchen, made another, and watched him cut one bite into 4 pieces without eating any of them. Now what? Undercooked. They're brown. Brown isn't cooked. They can't get more cooked without becoming coal. Then bring toast. Nora carried the plate away, counted to 10 beside the grill, and made toast. Elias touched it with one finger. Cold. It left the toaster 12 seconds ago. I'm not discussing this. That would be a refreshing change. He pushed the plate aside. Nora saw his trembling hand. She saw the exhaustion under his eyes and understood that the eggs were not the problem. But understanding did not make the cut less sharp. You know what? she said. You use disappointment like a lock. Elias went still. If nothing's good enough, nobody gets close enough to fail you. That the system? Nora. You did it to your cafe. You did it to whoever wanted to save it. Now you're doing it to eggs because eggs can't leave first. Color rose slowly into his face. You know nothing about my family. I know there is one. That's more than you usually admit. You saw a dirty room through glass. I saw you standing outside it with a key. Elias placed both palms on the table and stood. For a terrible second, Nora thought his legs might give way. She reached toward him. He pulled back. That hurt more than anything he could have said. I'm sorry, Nora whispered. Elias took his coat from the hook. He left his food untouched and no money on the table. The bell above the diner door gave one thin metallic sound as he walked out. Nora watched him cross toward the bus shelter. This time, he never looked at bells. The bus took Elias away, and the second plate of eggs hardened beneath the heat lamp. Nora threw them out at 11:15. At 11:20, she scraped them back out of the trash, sealed them in a takeout box, and wrote, I'm sorry, across the lid in black marker. She carried the box home before remembering she had nowhere to deliver it. By morning, the grease had spread through the cardboard beneath the words. She threw it away again. On Sunday, Nora left the grill on until 11. Elias did not come. She brewed the coffee strong, buttered no toast, and kept glancing at the door whenever headlights crossed the windows. Barry noticed because Barry noticed anything that might require him to change a schedule. Your boyfriend quit you? He's 79. Love doesn't check IDs. Neither do you when you hire dishwashers. That is an ugly rumor. Elias's back booth stayed empty. The following Sunday, Nora brought a sheet of diner stationery from the office and tried to write him a note. I didn't mean what I said was a lie. She crossed that out. I meant it, but I shouldn't have. Worse. She turned the page over. Your eggs were fine. That sounded like something he would appreciate, which made her dislike it. In the end, she wrote only, coffee's still poor. Sunday, 10:30. She folded the note twice and put it in her coat pocket. After closing, she walked 3 blocks to Bell's. The town had gone soft with late spring rain. Water dripped from the loose corner of the awning and struck the sidewalk at steady intervals. Nora pushed the folded paper beneath the locked door. It caught halfway. She got down on one knee and shoved it through with her diner name tag. There, she muttered, very dignified. The note disappeared into the darkness. She pictured Elias finding it. First he would criticize the handwriting, then the paper, then the coffee. He might still come. He did not. A third Sunday passed, then a fourth. Nora asked Barry if anyone had called for her. Bill collector, customer, complaint? Probably. No. She searched Elias Bell's name on her phone during break. The number he had written months ago was gone, but the search produced an address on Willow Street and an old newspaper photograph of Bell's cafe during a charity breakfast. The picture was 12 years old and grainy. Elias stood at one end of the counter holding a coffee pot. Beside him, a woman with short red hair laughed at something outside the frame. Nora had remembered the hair correctly. Ruth Bell's smile was wide and unguarded. Elias looked younger, but not happier. Even in the photograph, his attention was on Ruth. Nora zoomed in until their faces broke into squares. She copied the Willow Street address onto a receipt. The next afternoon, she carried it in her pocket all the way to the bus stop. Bus number 7 would take her within 2 blocks of the house. When the bus arrived, Nora stayed on the bench. An apology delivered to a man's front door was not an apology. It was an ambush. At least that was what she told herself, as the bus pulled away. On Friday, the diner phone rang during the lunch rush. Barry answered, yelled for Nora, and left the receiver hanging by its cord. She wedged it between her shoulder and ear while filling water glasses. Millbrook Diner, this is Nora. Ms. Hale? Yes, my name is Martin Keene. I'm an attorney here in Millbrook. I'm calling regarding Elias Bell. The pitcher struck the edge of the sink. Water ran over Nora's hand. What happened? There was a pause in which the answer became clear before he gave it. Mr. Bell died on Monday. The kitchen continued around her. Plates knocked against the pass. The fryer timer beeped. Barry shouted that table 9 needed ranch. Nora stood with cold water running between her fingers and heard Elias say, I'm aware of how I arrived. Was he in the hospital? I don't have those details. Did he? Was he alone? I'm sorry. I represent his estate. Mr. Bell named you in his will, and I'd like to arrange a meeting. Nora shut off the faucet. That doesn't make sense. I understand this may be unexpected. He didn't owe me anything. Martin Keene was quiet again. Attorney silence, Nora thought. Billed by the hour and used sparingly. Nevertheless, he said, he left you something. The office across from Bell's smelled of lemon furniture polish and wet wool. Nora arrived in her diner uniform because Barry had refused to let her leave before her replacement came. She had changed shoes on the bus, but a streak of ketchup remained on one sleeve. Celia noticed it. Grant noticed Nora noticing Celia. Martin Keene had just finished explaining the key, the building, the apartment, and the challenge when Celia asked what Nora had made Elias think she was. The question sat on the conference table beside the white envelope. Nora looked at Celia's gloved hands. The right thumb rubbed slowly across the left knuckle, back and forth, wearing a path that could not be seen. A waitress, Nora said. Grant gave a short, angry laugh. He left real estate to every waitress who brought him pie? He didn't tell me he was going to leave anything. He didn't tell us either. Grant, Martin said. No, I'd like to hear this. Grant leaned forward. How often did you see him? Once a week. For how long? About 8 months. And what did you talk about? Nora thought of pickled beets, the screwdriver, his dirty shirt, a bus shelter in the rain, food. Grant looked at his sister as if Nora had confirmed something. Celia had not taken her eyes off Nora. She was perhaps 45, though grief had sharpened her into someone older. Her dark hair was cut at her jaw, and a silver streak ran through one side without apology. Did he talk about our mother? Celia asked. Yes. That hurt her. Nora saw it. What did he say? That she ran the kitchen. She liked black pepper. She bought 10,000 red check paper liners. Grant looked down at the table. Celia's gloved hands stopped moving. Those came in cases of 2,000. He said there were 6 cases left. There were. Dad never knew how many she originally ordered. Nora felt as if she had failed a test Elias had never warned her about. He said 10,000. He lied when accuracy would have been easier. That sounds like him. You don't know what sounds like him. Martin removed his glasses and cleaned them with a square of gray cloth. Celia, Grant, I recognize how difficult this is, but we need to keep the discussion productive. Our mother's restaurant is not a discussion, Celia said. The real property belongs solely to your father, because she trusted him. The will was properly witnessed. Your challenge will be addressed through the required process. But until then, she has the key? Grant asked. The building requires inspection and maintenance. As executor, I have a duty to preserve the asset. Ms. Hale is the named beneficiary, but she may not remove or dispose of contents while the challenge is pending. Grant pointed at the envelope. Then, why give it to her? Because she is permitted access and because neither of you responded when I requested someone meet the insurance inspector last Thursday. Grant looked away. Celia said nothing. Martin slid a folder toward Nora. Inside were photocopied tax bills, a utility summary, and 3 pages of cramped legal language. Nora recognized numbers before meaning. Property taxes, insurance, estimated repairs, a red balance beside the water account. Are these debts mine? She asked. If there is a transfer, Grant said. Nora touched the edge of the folder. Can it be sold? Celia flinched as if Nora had raised a hand to her. Grant answered immediately. We'll buy it. Grant. What? If she wants cash, we settle this now. She gives up the bequest, we withdraw the challenge. Nora looked at him. How much? Celia stood so abruptly that her chair rolled backward. Of course, she said. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I need to know what's happening. My mother worked 32 years in that building, and you've had the key for 6 minutes. I haven't taken it out of the envelope. That makes all the difference. Celia grabbed her coat and left the office. Grant rubbed one hand over his face. Up close, he looked more tired than angry. She wanted to keep the cafe open after Mom died. Dad locked her out. Nora said nothing. He wouldn't sell. Wouldn't reopen, wouldn't let us move the equipment. Then he gave the whole thing to somebody he barely knew. Why? Grant looked at the white envelope. That's what we're trying to find out. He followed his sister downstairs. Martin waited until the outer door closed. You don't need to decide anything today, he said. Nora picked up the envelope. The brass key slid to one corner. Did he leave a message? No. A letter? Not that I'm aware of. Did he tell you why? Martin put his glasses back on. He told me the property was to go to Nora Hale of the Millbrook Diner. He was clear and legally competent. He was not forthcoming. That sounds like him too. Outside, evening had settled over the depot. Nora crossed the street alone. The key resisted at first. She had to pull the door toward her while turning it, the same trick Elias had used on the diner hinge. When the lock finally gave, the door opened only 10 inches before striking something. Nora squeezed through. The air inside was damp and stale, carrying old grease beneath the mildew. Her shoes disturbed gray dust. Light from the doorway stretched across the floor and stopped at the chrome counter. Near her feet lay the note she had pushed under the door. Coffee's still poor. Sunday, 10:30. The fold was clean, no footprint, no smear, no sign Elias had ever seen it. Nora picked it up and held it against her palm. Then something tapped in the darkness. She froze. Tap. A drop of water fell from the ceiling into a stock pot. Another answered from farther back. As her eyes adjusted, she saw pots and plastic tubs arranged across the dining room to catch the leaks. She found a switch. Nothing happened. Using her phone flashlight, Nora moved behind the counter. The rotating pie case stood beneath a coat of dust, its shelves empty, its electric cord wrapped neatly around the base. One green stool had a split cushion, another rocked when she touched it. The kitchen was worse. Cabinet doors hung open. Dark stains spread across the ceiling. The space where the main range should have stood was an empty rectangle rimmed in grime. Elias had said he owned walls and appliances. He had exaggerated the appliances. Nora climbed the narrow stairs at the back. The apartment above the cafe had a small kitchen, a bedroom, and wallpaper printed with faded yellow vines. A brown watermark crossed one wall at shoulder height. When Nora opened the sink cabinet, the smell drove her backward. She laughed once. Alone? It was either that or cry. Headlights moved across the papered front windows downstairs. A car door closed. Nora returned to the dining room as Celia entered, carrying her own key in a cardboard box. She took in Nora's ketchup-stained sleeve, the note in her hand, and the stockpots catching rain. "You wanted to know why he gave it to you," Celia said. Nora waited. Celia set the box on the counter. "He didn't leave you a cafe. He left you the thing he used to punish the rest of us." Nora looked around the dining room. He did a thorough job. Celia's expression tightened. The joke had been a mistake. Nora knew that before the last word left her mouth, but there was no graceful way to chase it down. "I'm sorry. You say that often?" "More lately." Celia opened the cardboard box. Inside were rolls of blue painter's tape, a black marker, plastic bags, and a stack of blank inventory sheets. "I'm taking my mother's personal things. Mr. Keene said nobody could remove anything. I'm not stealing from you. I didn't say you were. You were about to." Nora had not been, but she could see how little that mattered. Celia pulled on a pair of thin work gloves. "I'll photograph everything. Martin can approve it before I take a box out. Unless you'd like to claim her aprons, too." "I don't want her aprons. You got her building. I got a key and a folder of bills. You can still walk away." Celia turned on her phone flashlight and headed toward the kitchen. Nora followed. The beam moved across rusted prep tables, open cabinets, and pale squares where equipment had once stood. Celia stopped beneath the dark ceiling stain. Water tapped into the stock pot between them. "That was repaired," she said. "When? 7 years ago. Water may not respect warranties." Celia ignored her and opened the first cabinet. Stacks of saucers filled the upper shelf, each cream-colored with a green line near the rim. Several were chipped. Celia lifted one, rubbed dust from the edge, and placed it back. "Personal?" Nora asked. "Inventory, right." Celia opened the next cabinet. Mugs. The next held plastic lids with no matching containers. She moved quickly until she reached a narrow drawer beside the pass-through. It stuck halfway. Celia pulled harder. "Try lifting the front," Nora said. "I know how it works." The drawer remained stuck. Nora lifted the front while Celia pulled. It came free with a wooden scrape, spilling pencils, rubber bands, old receipts, and a metal thermometer onto the floor. Neither woman spoke. Nora crouched and began gathering things. Beneath the drawer was a folded white apron, embroidered Ruth in green thread. Celia picked it up. Dust had settled along the fold lines, but the fabric beneath remained bright. Celia pressed her thumb over the stitched name. She hated these, she said. The aprons, names on them. Dad ordered 6 as a surprise. She said if people didn't know who she was after 30 years, embroidery wasn't going to help. Nora smiled before remembering herself. Sounds reasonable. She wore it that day because he kept watching. Celia folded the apron along the old creases. Her face had changed, not softened exactly. The anger had moved aside to let something older stand beside it. "Were you working here?" Nora asked. "Since I was 18. Weekends before that, but not officially." "What did you do?" "Waited tables, ordered supplies, payroll when Dad got behind. Mom wanted me in the kitchen, but we couldn't work the line together without trying to kill each other. That's usually how you know a family recipe is good." Celia's mouth twitched. Then she remembered who had spoken. She placed the apron into a plastic bag and wrote on the label. Nora found a stack of laminated menus beneath the scattered receipts. Most were too warped to lie flat. Handwritten corrections covered the printed prices. Soup increased by 20 cents, coffee by a dime, Turkey Club crossed out and restored twice. The handwriting was careful, with narrow loops and firm downstrokes. "Yours?" Nora asked. Celia looked over. "Some." "Which part?" "The prices." Mom wrote the notes in red. Grant did the math and the margins. Nora turned one menu over. On the back, someone had calculated how many lunch specials had to sell to pay for a replacement compressor. The numbers filled every open space. "Did you reopen after she died?" "No." "He said you wanted to." "I had keys. I had staff willing to come back. I had a menu we could reduce and enough money to cover 2 months if we were careful." "What happened?" "My father changed the locks." The stock pot rang with another drop. Nora glanced toward the front door. "Same key for 6 years?" "He gave Martin the new ones." "You never came back inside?" "Grant did. Dad let him remove equipment when the bills got bad. I came once to help make a list, and they spent the whole time arguing about what things were worth." Celia took the menu from Nora's hands. "Dad wouldn't sell the range to Grant because Mom had chosen it," she said. "Then he sold it to a restaurant auction 2 months later for less. That doesn't make sense." "No." "Why?" "Because Grant asked first." The simplicity of the answer made it uglier. Celia returned the menu to the stack. "That's who left you this place." "I know who he was." "No. You knew who he could afford to be for an hour on Sunday." Nora thought of Elias on the diner floor, his shirt collecting grime. She thought of him outside Bell's, unable to put the key in the lock. "He wasn't easy with me. He came back, didn't he?" The words were quiet, but they struck with precision. Nora looked away. A drop landed somewhere beyond the kitchen, then another, faster. Celia tilted her head. "That's new." They followed the sound to the narrow hall beneath the apartment stairs. Water ran down the wall in a thin, shining line. Nora aimed her light upward. Bathroom? Kitchen sink. They climbed. The smell beneath the sink had worsened. Water seeped from a corroded joint and pooled across the cabinet base before slipping through a gap in the floor. "Shut-off's behind the stove," Celia said. "There is no stove." "Upstairs stove." A small electric range stood against the wall. They pulled it forward together, the feet screeching across the linoleum. A square panel was hidden behind it. Nora opened the panel. "Which valve?" "Blue handle." "There are 2 blue handles. Cold supply?" "They're not labeled." "The left." "Your left or mine?" "We're facing the same direction." "Good. We're making progress." Nora turned the valve. It refused to move. Celia wrapped both hands around it and tried. "Let me. I have it." "You very much don't." Together, they forced the handle clockwise. The metal groaned, then shifted. In the cabinet, the stream weakened to a drip. Celia sat back against the wall, breathing hard. Nora remained crouched beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. A cobweb clung to Celia's silver-streaked hair. "You have something," Nora said. Celia brushed the wrong side. "Other side." She brushed again. "Now you have it in 2 places. Wonderful." Nora reached over and lifted the cobweb away. Celia looked at her. For half a second, they were only 2 exhausted women on a dirty kitchen floor. Then Celia stood. "I'll tell Martin the plumbing needs immediate work. I can replace that joint." "Are you a plumber now?" "No, but I recognize a wrench." "You didn't the first time." Nora stared at her. Celia dusted the knees of her pants. Dad told Grant about the diner door. Something warm and painful moved through Nora before she could stop it. "What else did he tell him?" "I don't know. Did he tell Grant about me? He said there was a waitress who argued about everything and made dishonest pie. Mostly dishonest. He didn't mention your name. The warmth vanished as quickly as it had come. Celia carried the bagged apron downstairs. She photographed it on the counter beside an inventory sheet, then packed her supplies. At the door, she paused. The building is insured only as vacant property, she said. If you do anything foolish, make sure Martin knows. What counts as foolish? Thinking effort makes something love you back. She left with the apron still on the counter, waiting for permission. Nora stayed until the rain stopped. She placed another pot beneath the new leak and arranged the others so the sound became less random. In the apartment, she wiped the cabinet dry and wrapped a diner rag around the failed joint. Before locking up, she found a marker in Celia's box and wrote the date beside each leak on strips of painter's tape. It was not ownership, it was maintenance. That distinction held for 11 days. Then a man in a gray suit handed Nora an envelope while she was refilling ketchup at the diner. "Are you Nora Hale?" She looked at the envelope. "Depends." He smiled without pleasure. "You've been served." Barry watched from the register, as if this were the best lunch special they had offered in years. The petition used phrases like undue influence, diminished capacity, and unnatural disposition. Grant and Celia alleged that Elias's decision could not represent his true intent. Nora read the pages twice in the employee restroom, sitting on the closed toilet with her apron gathered in her lap. Martin referred her to an attorney who requested $2,500 up front. Nora had $812 in her checking account, a car that existed only in past tense conversation, and $18.41 in Elias's cereal bowl. Grant called the diner the next morning. "I'll give you $5,000 to sign a release," he said. Nora held the phone away from the kitchen noise. "For the cafe, for ending this. Is that what it's worth? With the repairs? It may be generous. Then why challenge the will?" Silence. "Because Celia wants it," he said. "Does she?" "She wants him not to have given it away." That, Nora understood. Mr. Larkin knocked on her door that evening while she was eating beets from the jar. "Rent's going up in July," he said. 75. The railing's still loose. Cost of materials. "You haven't bought materials." "Exactly. Imagine if I did." Nora shut the door and looked around the room. The bed, the hot plate, the thermos on the counter, the bowl of coins. She could pay rent, or she could pay an attorney. Not both for long. The apartment above Bell's had mildew, one working cold water line, questionable electricity, and no legal guarantee it would remain hers. It also had no landlord. Martin objected when she proposed moving in. Grant called it proof she was trying to take possession. Celia sent no message at all. The insurance company required the worst electrical hazards to be corrected first. The estate paid for that, and the failed pipe because leaving either would damage the property further. Everything else remained Nora's problem, present or future. On the last night of June, she carried 2 duffel bags, a laundry basket, and Elias's thermos through the cafe's front door. Her furniture stayed above the tire shop because Mr. Larkin demanded a fee to move it down his stairs. Nora placed her cereal bowl of coins on the apartment windowsill. The faded yellow vines curled around it. Downstairs, water tapped into the stock pots. Nora lay on a mattress on the floor and listened. At 2:17 in the morning, she went down, removed the stopped clock from the kitchen wall, and took out its dead battery. The silence afterward was worse. She put the battery back in. The clock ticked badly. It would run for 40 seconds, hesitate, then make 3 quick clicks as if catching up with itself. Nora lay awake listening until sunrise turned the faded wallpaper the color of weak tea. At 6, she found a dead moth in the coffee pot upstairs. At 6:10, the bathroom faucet coughed brown water onto her only clean shirt. At 6:15, someone pounded on the front door. Nora went downstairs carrying Elias's toolbox in one hand and a rolling pin in the other. She had found the toolbox beneath the apartment sink, its red paint scratched in the same place as she remembered. Grant stood outside. He looked from the rolling pin to the toolbox when she opened the door. "Planning breakfast or murder? Depends who's asking." "You're living here. Good morning to you too." He leaned sideways to see past her. Her laundry basket sat beside the counter because the apartment floor had been too damp to trust overnight. "I told Martin this would happen. You offered me $5,000. You can't be shocked I needed cheaper housing." Grant stepped inside without being invited. His shoes left clean prints in the dust Nora had not yet mopped. You can't inhabit a commercial property under vacant building insurance. There's an apartment. With no occupancy permit, it had one before. Everything had something before. The words sounded too much like Elias. Grant seemed to hear it too. His mouth tightened. He walked toward the kitchen, checking the ceiling, the outlets, the missing range. Unlike Celia, he did not touch anything. He kept his hands in the pockets of his khakis and looked as if he were touring the scene of an argument that had never ended. "The gas is capped?" he asked. "I don't use gas. That's not what I asked." "I don't know. Then don't turn a valve." Excellent advice. "Anything about swallowing bleach?" Grant crouched beside the wall where the range had been. He tugged on a short metal pipe, checked the cap, and stood. "It's sealed. Thank you. I didn't do it for you." "Runs in the family?" He looked at her sharply. Nora set the rolling pin on the prep table. "Sorry. No, you aren't. No. But I'm trying to develop the reflex." Grant entered the narrow office beyond the kitchen. It contained a scarred desk, 2 file cabinets, and shelves bowed beneath binders. He opened the top drawer of the desk. "Celia inventoried this?" "Not yet. Don't let her do it alone. I don't think she wants my company. She doesn't want anyone's company when she's angry. She must be very independent." Grant closed the drawer. "She'll try to keep every receipt Mom touched. Then she'll get home and realize she has boxes of receipts. That's her decision. Celia doesn't make decisions. She creates obligations and waits to see who loves her enough to fulfill them." Nora wondered what Celia would say about him. Grant pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and placed it on the desk. A contractor had listed estimated costs for roof work, mold treatment, plumbing, and replacement equipment. The total at the bottom was more than Nora's mother's catering business had earned in its last year. "You paid someone to do this?" she asked. "I know contractors. The petition says the property has significant value. The petition was written by a lawyer." "Your lawyer." "Exactly." Nora read the total again. "Why offer $5,000 if you think I'd inherit this?" "To save time. And legal fees." "How much is the land worth?" Grant's eyes narrowed. "Less with a condemned building." "It isn't condemned. Not yet." She folded the estimate along its existing line. "You want me scared. I want you realistic. My father had the luxury of being sentimental because other people paid for it. Taxes, insurance, emergency repairs. He'd call me when something failed and accuse me of caring too much about money when I asked how he planned to fix it. Why did you keep paying? Because Celia would if I didn't." There it was, an obligation waiting to see who loved enough. Grant took the estimate back. 5,000. No court hearings, no roof, no mold. You can move somewhere with hot water. Nora thought of Elias standing outside the cafe with the green tag key in his pocket. It was not a reason. It was barely a memory. "I'll think about it." Grant nodded, but disappointment crossed his face. He had expected a fight and did not know what to do with permission. At the door, he pointed to the lower left corner of the frame. "It swells when it rains. Pull before you turn the key." "I figured that out. Dad always pushed." Grant left. Nora looked at the door. The family seemed to have spent decades learning how Elias entered rooms. She called the bakery number that afternoon. The newspaper listing had expired months ago, but Granger's Bakery had lost 2 employees since printing it. The owner, Maribel Granger, asked Nora to come at 4 the next morning. 4, Nora repeated. "That's when morning starts. Morning starts when the sun participates. Then you don't want bakery work. I'll be there." Nora arrived at 3:58 wearing damp shoes and carrying Ruth's thermos. Maribel was a short woman in her 50s with silver braids, flour on both elbows, and no interest in Nora's difficult night. She pointed at 50 pounds of dough. "Divide that into 3-ounce rolls. By weight, by divine guidance." "Yes, by weight." For 3 hours, Nora portioned, rounded, proofed, washed, and tried not to slow the production line. Maribel corrected everything. Nora's rolls had seams. Her bench flour was excessive. She opened the oven door too long and let heat escape. "You have professional experience?" Maribel asked. "Catering." "Doing what?" "Everything. That means nothing." Nora nearly dropped a tray. At 10, Maribel cut open one of Nora's rolls. The crumb was even, the crust thin. "Come tomorrow," she said. "Am I hired? You're invited back. Hiring requires confidence. Do you always make good news sound threatening?" 4 o'clock. Barry took Nora's resignation poorly. I gave you Sundays, he said. You scheduled me Sundays. Same result. I can still close Saturday for 2 weeks. And after? I don't know. You're leaving for less money? Steadier hours. You hate mornings. I contain multitudes. You contain complaints. He paced behind the diner counter, rearranging wrapped straws as if Nora's departure were a problem of alignment. Finally, he pointed toward Elias's empty booth. You gonna tell him? Nora looked at the seat. He died. Barry stopped moving. When? Last month. Why didn't you say something? She did not know, because saying it at work would make every untouched cup about him, because Barry might offer sympathy, because Elias had spent 8 months arriving and only 1 sentence leaving. I'm saying it now. Barry lowered his hand. That why you're moving into the haunted restaurant? It's not haunted. You heard noises. It leaks. Sometimes ghosts leak. Please put that on my employment reference. On Nora's final Saturday, Barry brewed a fresh pot at 10:45 and left it on the warmer without comment. She drank 1 cup in the back booth after the doors were locked. Before leaving, she opened the register drawer and found a small paper bag. Inside were the coins from the chipped cereal bowl. Barry had apparently gathered them from her room during the move when he helped carry nothing and complained about the stairs. On the bag, he had written retirement fund, minus whatever you stole in pie. Nora laughed hard enough to spill coffee. She began cleaning Bells in sections. 1 booth took an hour. The chrome counter took 6. Beneath the grease and dust, it reflected light in wavering strips. She removed the paper from one front window, and afternoon flooded into the room so suddenly that the damage became embarrassing. People started looking in. Most kept walking. Some cupped their hands against the glass. One woman tried the door, saw Nora, and hurried away as if caught trespassing. Nora put up a sign, "Not open." Someone added, "Yet?" beneath it in blue pen. Nora added, "No." The next morning, the question mark had been circled. Celia returned on a Thursday carrying more inventory sheets. She stopped inside the door. You took down the paper. It was holding moisture. You polished the counter. It was dirty. Why? That's generally why people clean. Celia walked to the 3rd stool from the end and pushed it. It rocked. 4th, Nora said. Celia moved to the next one. It rocked more. Dad fixed that 20 times. Badly, consistently. They worked without agreement. Celia inventoried dishes while Nora scrubbed the lower shelves. When Nora reached for a jug of bleach, Celia took it from her. It ruins the old floor. It's already ruined. It can be ruined correctly. She mixed hot water, dish soap, and a smaller amount of bleach in a bucket. That's still bleach, Nora said. It's restraint. Nora scrubbed with Celia's solution. At noon, a man with a white beard knocked on the glass. He wore green work pants and a Cleveland Guardians cap, faded almost pink. Celia looked up. Theo. The man tried the door. Nora had locked it. He knocked again. Do we know Theo? Nora asked. He washed dishes here. How long? 23 years. That's a lot of dishes. He liked the radio. Theo pointed at the not open sign, then at himself, as if requesting an exemption based on literacy. Celia went to unlock the door. Theo James entered with his cap in both hands. At 64, he had the cautious posture of someone entering a church after missing several years. Smells wrong, he said. We cleaned, Celia replied. That'll do it. His eyes moved over the counter, the empty kitchen, the bright square where paper had covered the window. He nodded to Nora. You the waitress? Nora, L's waitress. Nora disliked how much the name hurt. The light over the pass still dead? Theo asked. Most lights are dead. He walked into the kitchen, opened the electrical panel, and tapped the 3rd fuse from the top with 1 knuckle. The pass light flickered on. Theo smiled at it. Loose seat, he said. Always has been. From the dining room came a low mechanical hum. The pie case shuttered. Its empty shelves moved half an inch, stopped, then moved again. Celia stood very still. Theo turned toward the sound. Huh. Nora watched the shelves complete one slow, uneven revolution. On the glass, beneath years of dust, a fingerprint went around with them. The fingerprint made 6 trips before the pie case stopped. Theo tapped the fuse again. The light above the pass brightened. The case resumed its patient turn. Should we be doing that? Nora asked. Been doing it since 1998. That wasn't the question. Theo removed the fuse, wiped its metal base against his shirt, and screwed it in firmly. Needs a new socket? Expensive? More expensive if the wall catches. Celia gave Nora a pointed look. I understand fire, Nora said. Theo wandered through the kitchen, opening doors and making small sounds of recognition. He knew which cabinet stuck, which floor tile shifted under the left heel, and where Ruth had kept antacid tablets in an empty baking powder tin. The tin was still there. Theo opened it and found 2 rolls of quarters. For the radio, he said. What radio? Nora asked. Mine broke. Then why are the quarters here? For a new one. Celia leaned against the prep table. You never bought it? Was saving. The quarters had been waiting 6 years for a radio no longer manufactured. Theo put the tin back exactly where he had found it. He examined the empty space where the commercial dishwasher had stood. Grant sold this? After Dad stopped paying the electric bill, Celia said. Good machine. It flooded twice. Still washed. Mostly the floor. Theo smiled. Floor was clean. Nora followed him into the pantry. The shelves held sealed paper products, rusted cans, and plastic tubs with lids warped from summer heat. 6 cases of red check paper liners stood against the back wall. 10,000? Nora said. 12, Celia corrected. Nora ran one finger through the dust on the top case. I'm choosing to believe Elias. That would be a first. Theo looked between them. L tell you 10? Repeatedly. Ruth ordered 12. Said we'd use them before they went out of style. Did they? Nora asked. First week. He laughed quietly at his own answer. Theo returned the following morning with a replacement fuse socket and a radio tucked beneath his arm. The radio was almost as old as the cafe, silver with a long black antenna held straight by electrical tape. I thought yours broke, Nora said. Different one. Where did this one come from? My garage? Does your garage have electricity? Some. He refused money for the socket and accepted 2 rolls from Granger's bakery instead. When Nora pointed out that this was barter and not refusal, Theo said he had no idea what she meant. By the end of the week, the cafe had a working pass light, an unreliable radio, and 3 people behaving as though none of them had agreed to help. Celia came after work in clothes she could ruin. She handled purchasing for a regional hospital now, a fact Nora learned only after asking why Celia could estimate the wholesale price of paper towels from 20 feet away. You still do orders, Nora said. I do procurement. Orders with a college degree. Orders with 600 departments blaming me when manufacturers discontinue beige. Theo worked until noon, went home for a nap, and returned around 4 if the radio reception was good. He could not repair everything, but he knew what had once been repaired, and whether the repair had failed honestly or through what he called Bell ingenuity. Bell ingenuity? Nora asked. Your temporary solution lasts until somebody else owns the problem. Celia scraped old adhesive from the front window harder than necessary. Nora's mornings began at 3:15. She walked to Granger's in darkness, shaped rolls under Maribel's unsparing eye, and returned to Bell's smelling of yeast and oven heat. She slept from 1 until 3 when the roof allowed it, then cleaned until her hands went stiff. Maribel noticed the stiffness. You're gripping dough like it owes you money. It does. Dough doesn't negotiate. Neither do you. Maribel turned Nora's hands palm up. The skin around 2 knuckles had split from cleaning chemicals. Gloves. I use them. Use better ones. The next morning, a box of heavy rubber gloves appeared beside Nora's station. Maribel never mentioned it. Nora took home the pair dusted with flour and told herself it was not theft if the owner had sighed at her while looking directly at the box. The attorney Nora hired called during a proofing cycle. She stepped into the alley behind the bakery, where warm exhaust rolled from a vent and mosquitoes treated her ankles as breakfast. Settlement remains the practical option, the attorney said. Mr. Bell's children have increased their offer to $7,500. Why? Litigation costs both sides money. That didn't bother them last week. There may also be concern about your continued occupancy, concern that I'm maintaining the property, concern that it creates an appearance of possession before the estate is resolved. Nora watched Maribel through the back window, moving racks without waiting for help. What happens if I refuse? We proceed. Depositions, medical records, witness testimony. It could take months. How much more money? The attorney gave an estimate. Nora's checking account gave its own answer. She went back inside and burned the first tray of rolls she had touched all week. Maribel inspected the blackened tops. Thinking about something else? No? Then you're bad at this. I'm thinking. Do it away from the oven. That afternoon, Nora found Grant waiting beneath the green awning. He held a paper cup of coffee from the gas station. That's insulting, Nora said, unlocking the door. It was open. Anything is open if you don't have standards. Exactly my point. He followed her inside. The polished counter caught the late light. 4 stools had been lowered from the countertop. The others remained upside down because Nora had not yet cleaned beneath them. Grant stopped when he heard the radio. A baseball announcer spoke through static from the kitchen. "Theo," Grant said, "your powers of deduction are terrifying. Does he know the electrical system isn't safe?" He replaced a socket. "With whose permission?" "The fuses." Grant put his coffee on the counter. "You're making our case for us." "How?" "You moved in. You're altering the property. You've got former staff working here. Nobody is working. Working gets paid. That's not better." Nora picked up his gas station coffee and dropped it into the trash. "I was drinking that. It was damaging the atmosphere." "You think this is funny?" "No." That stopped him. Nora opened the folder from her attorney and placed the settlement offer on the counter. "Why 75? Because 5 didn't work. You said the building might be worth less than the repairs. It might. Then you're spending legal fees to overpay me for something you don't want. I want this done. So does Celia." Grant looked toward the kitchen. "Does she know you came?" Nora asked. "She knows the offer. That wasn't my question." His face reddened. Nora folded the offer. "What happens if I sign?" "The property returns to the estate. Celia and I decide whether to sell. Does she think you'll reopen?" "She knows we won't." "Does she?" Grant's jaw moved. "The roof alone could run $40,000, he said. "The hood system is obsolete. Plumbing needs replacement. There's no dishwasher, no range, no walk-in. Even if you beat the challenge, you haven't inherited a business. You inherited deferred maintenance with a logo. Then why did your father keep it? Because letting go would have required admitting Mom was gone. And why did he leave it to me?" Grant looked at the stools. "Maybe because you didn't know better. It was the cruelest possibility because it was plausible." Theo came in through the kitchen carrying a paper sack of tomatoes. He saw Grant and slowed. "Hey," Grant said. "Hey!" They stood 10 feet apart in a room where they had once worked together. Theo lifted the sack. "Darla's garden. Darla still overplants, still complains we don't take enough." Grant nodded toward the empty dishwasher space. "I sold it to Sweeney's. Heard. It was going to seize. Heard that too. I paid the back water bill with it." Theo set the tomatoes on the prep table. "Didn't ask?" Grant's face changed. Nora had expected accusation from Theo, perhaps even gratitude. His refusal to provide either left Grant with nowhere to place the old defense. "I didn't just strip the place," Grant said. Theo began unloading tomatoes one by one. "Didn't say you did. Dad did. Your dad said lots." Celia entered from the front carrying 2 file boxes. She stopped when she saw her brother. "Are you pressuring her?" "I brought the revised offer. You said you'd email it." Nora wanted answers. "I asked questions," Nora said. Nobody brought answers. Celia set the boxes on a booth. "Grant, go home. This is my mother's place, too. Then stop trying to buy it from the person she left it to." He left it. The correction tore through the room. Celia's face drained. Grant closed his eyes briefly. "I know." Nobody spoke. The radio announcer described a pitch outside the strike zone. Theo cut a tomato with his pocket knife, salted 1 slice from a shaker beside the stove, and ate it. "Darla's early ones are mealy," he said. They were. Nora ate one anyway. Grant left without retrieving his coffee. Celia opened the file boxes after he was gone. Inside were old cost sheets, handwritten recipes, vendor lists, and binders from Belle's final years. "These were in the lower file cabinet," she said. "Martin approved moving them upstairs if the damp gets worse." Nora lifted a page sealed inside a cloudy plastic sleeve. "Chicken soup." Ruth's red notes crowded the margins. "Pepper after simmer, not before. Wide noodles Friday only. Save celery leaves." Beneath Ruth's handwriting, Celia had recalculated the yield for a smaller batch. Grant had added prices in blue. At the bottom, Elias had written "too much chicken," then crossed it out so hard the paper had nearly torn. "Did you all write on everything?" Nora asked. "We didn't talk." "So you edited recipes?" Celia sat in the booth. Paper didn't interrupt. Nora turned another page. Meatloaf, 2 words. You were right, she said. About meatloaf. Celia looked at the recipe and laughed before she could stop herself. The sound transformed her. Nora could suddenly see the young woman who had worked weekends and argued with Ruth on the line. They took the soup recipe upstairs. The apartment stove had 2 functioning burners. Nora used a stock pot from downstairs while Celia chopped vegetables. Theo sat at the tiny table, listening to the game and rejecting every task offered to him. You cut those too big, Celia told Nora. They shrink. Not enough. You put the pepper in early. That was Mom's superstition. It's written in red. Red meant she was angry. Then she was furious about pepper. The soup simmered into the evening. They tasted it from mismatched mugs because Nora had no bowls upstairs. It was wrong, too thin, too sweet, missing whatever memory had supplied. Celia added salt. Nora added pepper. Theo added nothing and tasted 3 times. Close, he said. Celia stared into her mug. No, it isn't. Nora expected her to cry. Celia stood instead, carried the pot downstairs, and poured the soup into plastic containers for Theo and Darla. Waste was a hanging offense, she said. Before leaving, Celia turned the not open sign around. On the back, beneath the blue, yet, she wrote someday in narrow, careful letters. Nora stared at it after the door closed. Then she crossed out someday. Underneath, she wrote maybe. Maybe lasted 2 days. Someone underlined it. Someone else drew a coffee cup beside it. Darla, who turned out to be Theo's neighbor rather than his wife, as Nora had assumed, taped a note to the glass, offering tomatoes, zucchini, or too much basil, God help me. Nora removed the notes each night. New ones appeared every morning. On Thursday, a woman pressed both palms to the window while Nora scrubbed the pie case. When? The woman shouted through the glass. We're not opening, the woman pointed at maybe. It's a complicated maybe. I worked here in 2003. Does that help? No. Place was a mess then too. She walked away before Nora could ask her name. Nora turned the sign back to not open. 10 minutes later, Theo turned it around again. Whose side are you on? Door's side. The door has a side. Outside. She threatened to take away his radio. Theo pointed out that it was his radio. The possibility became harder to dismiss after the insurance company approved limited repairs, and Nora's attorney explained that operating the cafe would neither strengthen nor destroy her claim by itself. It may complicate valuation, the attorney said. Everything complicates valuation. Yes. Can lawyers say anything without turning it into fog? Not if we're careful. The estate would not pay to reopen Bell's. Nora could spend her own money on improvements, but if she lost the will challenge, she might recover none of it. Her attorney repeated this 3 times. Nora heard Elias in every repetition. Waste, pride, poor location, bad math, family. Some combination. She took Ruth's cost binders to Pace Restaurant Supply. Leonard Pace had delivered to Bell's for 26 years before retiring and giving the company to his business partner. He met Nora in a warehouse office crowded with sample cups and calendars from poultry distributors. He was 70, narrow as a broom handle, and wore a hearing aid he switched off whenever the conversation displeased him. I need a small account, Nora said. No, you haven't looked at my numbers. No numbers make you own the building. I'm the named beneficiary. You're being sued, challenged, fancy sued. Leonard spread Nora's proposed menu across the desk. Chicken soup, turkey melt, grilled cheese, apple cake. 4 items, 3 evenings a week, front counter only. Too much, he said. It's 4 things. It's 12 things wearing hats. 2 breads, 3 cheeses, turkey, soup chicken, apples, cream, butter, eggs, flour. You want pickles? Yes. 13. Nora sat back. What would Ruth do? Argue. After? Keep the pickles. Leonard opened one of the old binders. He moved through Ruth's pages with quick familiarity. Stopping at the chicken soup calculation, Celia had adjusted. Wide noodles. Friday only, he said. I saw that. Friday was turkey delivery, bones went into stock, celery leaves from sandwiches, ends of onions. Monday soup cost more because she had to buy chicken. She served different soup. Monday, bean. That's not in the binder. Wasn't a recipe. Beans, ham bone, anger. Nora wrote it down. Leonard tapped the turkey melt. Use 1 bread. Rye doesn't work for grilled cheese. Then don't sell grilled cheese. It's the cheapest thing. Cheap doesn't matter if you buy another case of bread and throw half away. He kept dismantling her menu until the ingredients overlapped enough to fit on one sheet. He refused credit. He also called 3 people and found her an under-counter refrigerator with a dented door, a countertop soup warmer, and a commercial toaster that burned one side if left unsupervised. Cash, he said. How much? He named a figure that consumed nearly all the money left after her legal retainer. Nora looked at the binder. Bad math, Leonard said. I know. Do you? No. Good. Celia found the equipment list on the counter that evening. You're serious. I'm considering seriousness. You can't cook 4 menu items with a toaster and a soup warmer. I have the apartment stove. You cannot prepare commercial food in a residential kitchen. I know. Do you? That line worked better when Leonard used it. Celia read the revised menu. Mom's soup? If we can get it right. We can't. Not with that attitude. Attitude isn't the missing ingredient. Nora waited. Celia set the paper down. The stock stayed overnight. In the walk-in, on the back burner, low. For how long? Until Dad came in at 4. That's why it tastes wrong? That's how Mom did it. That's also how you grow bacteria with family traditions. Celia looked offended on Ruth's behalf, then reluctant agreement took its place. We could make the stock darker first, Nora said. Roast the bones. Mom never did. Your mother isn't applying for the permit. The sentence hung between them. Nora regretted it. Celia did not flinch this time. No, she said. She isn't. They made 4 versions of the soup over 6 nights. Theo ate everyone and called them close. Nora and Celia stopped asking him. The 4th version used roasted bones, Ruth's pepper timing, Nora's browned onion, and less celery than either believed correct. Celia tasted it from a mug and went back for another spoonful. It's not hers, she said. No, it's good. Yes, I hate that. I know. Celia looked toward the recipe binders. We need to rewrite the yield. She said we without noticing. The health inspector arrived on a Tuesday while Theo had half the counter outlets disconnected. He stood in the doorway, screwdriver in hand. The inspector looked at the hanging wires. Nora said, They're improving. The inspection produced 3 pages of violations. The water heater was undersized. The hand-washing sink lacked proper splash protection. 2 ceiling tiles showed moisture damage. The kitchen floor had cracks that could not be adequately cleaned. The old hood system required certification, even if Nora did not plan to use the missing range beneath it. The inspector was not cruel. That made the list worse. He showed Nora which items prevented opening and which could wait. Theo followed behind them, muttering that the cracked floor had passed inspections when men wore hats indoors. Health codes don't age backward, the inspector said. Should, Theo replied. The water heater cost more than Nora's equipment. She sat on the kitchen floor after the inspector left. The violation pages spread around her like losing cards. Theo handed her a tomato. What am I supposed to do with this? Darla sent it. I'm having a crisis. Needs eating anyway. Nora bit into the tomato. Juice ran down her wrist. Theo sat beside her, knees cracking on the way. Ruth failed first inspection. Really? No. Place was new. Nora threw the tomato stem at him. He caught it and put it in his shirt pocket. Grant came that evening. Celia had sent him the violation list without telling Nora. He walked through the kitchen, made 2 phone calls, and wrote numbers beside each item. Nora stayed at the prep table with her arms crossed. Don't make the face, he said. What face? The one where help becomes an insult before it reaches you. I learned from a professional. Dad didn't accept help. He invoiced you for offering. Grant crouched to inspect the floor cracks. You don't need to replace the whole floor. Commercial epoxy. Theo knows a guy. Theo is a guy. Theo knows all the other guys. He moved to the sink. Splash panels can be stainless sheet. Water heater's the problem. I gathered that. I can get 1 wholesale. I can't pay wholesale. Grant straightened. No, Nora said. I didn't offer anything. You were going to. I was going to say the estate should pay because it preserves the building. The estate is controlled by Martin. Martin can approve necessary maintenance. Opening a cafe isn't necessary maintenance. Replacing a water heater in an apartment with an occupied beneficiary might be. You said I shouldn't occupy it. I say many things. Another family trait. Grant smiled despite himself, then lost it. If you lose the challenge, the improvements stay with the property, he said. I know. You're spending money on something that may become ours. I know. Why? Nora looked at the cracked green tiles beneath them. Because cleaning it wasn't enough. That isn't an answer. It's the one I have. Grant left the violation list on the counter. He did not mention the settlement offer. Martin approved replacement of the failed water heater as preservation of the apartment. Nora paid for the stainless panels and floor repair. Theo's guy turned out to be Theo wearing different pants. He accepted apple cake as a deposit and worked slowly enough to earn an entire loaf. Maribel allowed Nora to bake the cakes at Granger's after production ended, provided she paid for ingredients, cleaned everything, and never called them pies. Why would I call cake pie? You have poor judgment. Your confidence in me has grown. It started lower. Nora kept her shifts at the bakery and slept less. She woke once with her face against a sack of flour, and Maribel standing over her. You can't live here, Maribel said. I live somewhere worse. The second inspection passed. Nora stared at the signed paper until the inspector asked whether she understood that approval was conditional on limiting operations to the equipment and menu described. I understand. You don't look happy. I was expecting trumpets. Those require a separate permit. The joke was bad enough to make her like him. Celia designed a one-page menu using the old green bell. Theo lowered 6 stools. Darla donated basil, which appeared nowhere on the menu, but arrived in such volume that the apartment smelled Italian. Grant stayed away. On the first Thursday, Nora put soup in the warmer, turkey in the dented refrigerator, apple cake in the rotating case, and red check paper beneath the rolls. Celia stood outside with the sign in her hands. We can wait a week, she said. For what? I don't know. More chairs. We have 6. An awning that isn't falling down. It's only falling on one side. A final answer from the court. That could take months. Celia looked through the glass at Ruth's soup listed in fresh black letters. You're still challenging the will? Nora said. Yes. You're helping me open the cafe you say I shouldn't own. Yes, just checking. Celia's fingers tightened around the sign. I don't know how to stop being angry at him without giving up the last thing he might still hear. He can't hear you. I know that. Nora thought of the note inside the locked door. I talked to him for 8 months, she said. I'm not sure he heard me either. Celia turned the sign from not open to open. They waited. Theo took the last stool and drank coffee he had not paid for. Darla arrived with basil and occupied another. Celia sat in a booth pretending to review inventory sheets. Nobody else came. At 6:47, a man opened the door, looked around, and asked if he could use the bathroom. Nora pointed down the hall. He used it and left. At 7:15, she sold 1 bowl of soup to a woman who thought Bell's was still a thrift store. At 8, the apple cake had completed 73 revolutions. Nora knew because she counted. At 8:30, she turned the sign back to not open. Theo lifted his empty mug. Good first night. We made $6. Bathroom worked. Apparently that's our strongest feature. Celia carried the untouched soup toward the kitchen. Waste is a hanging offense, she said. Nora watched the open side of the sign disappear against the glass. Same time tomorrow, she said. Celia did not turn around, but she nodded. Friday brought 9 customers. 4 were Theo's friends. 2 ordered coffee and split 1 piece of apple cake. Darla brought more basil and paid for soup with a 20. Nora suspected had come from Theo. The woman who had mistaken Bell's for a thrift store returned carrying a lamp. You're sure? She asked. We serve food. You had chairs in the window. We still have chairs in the window. Yes, but now people are sitting on them. She bought soup again and left the lamp beside the register. Saturday brought 11 customers, not counting a man who entered to ask directions to a Mexican restaurant. Nora gave him accurate directions and disliked herself for it. At closing, she counted $38 after ingredients. Up 600%, Theo said. Your coffee was free. Can't put a price on loyalty. I can. $2. Theo patted his pockets with theatrical concern. Celia slid $2 across the counter without looking up from the receipts. You're enabling him? I'm preserving relationships. You're buying the same coffee we served at the diner. It's better here, Theo said. Why? Cup. He lifted one of the cream-colored mugs with the green line around the rim. A chip interrupted the stripe near his thumb. Nora did not argue. The next week, rain kept everyone home. the soup warmer held a full batch at 7:30. Nora portioned it into containers while Celia calculated the loss. "We should reduce Thursday production by 40%, Celia said. "If somebody comes after 7, we run out. That would be a success. It would be an empty warmer, which is what success looks like in food service. Your mother left soup overnight. My mother did many things the health department would now describe in capital letters." Nora filled the last container. "I'll make less tomorrow." Celia marked the adjustment on the cost sheet. Neither mentioned the challenge. It entered the room in other ways. A legal invoice arrived between the electric bill and a coupon for replacement windows. Grant's attorney requested a deposition. Martin reminded all three that the building remained part of an unsettled estate and that every expense needed documentation. Nora documented the $4 package of sponges and wondered how grief had acquired this much paperwork. At the deposition, Grant's attorney offered her water in a plastic bottle and asked whether Elias ever appeared confused. No. Did he repeat himself? Yes. How often? Whenever he thought I was wrong. Did that happen often? He thought so. The court reporter's fingers moved without expression. Grant sat beside his attorney. Celia sat at the far end of the table, a yellow legal pad untouched in front of her. Nora's attorney had warned her to address only the questions, but Grant's face kept pulling her attention. He looked ashamed to be there and unwilling to leave. "Did Mr. Bell give you gifts?" the attorney asked. "A thermos, pickle beets, money, tips? How much?" "Usually less than $1. Approximately how much over the course of your acquaintance?" Nora imagined Elias calculating the total and criticizing her for failing to keep records. $18.41. Grant looked up. The attorney checked his notes. "You're certain?" "I saved the coins." "Why?" "I don't know." "Did Mr. Bell ever discuss leaving you Bell's Cafe?" "No." "Did you discuss the cafe?" "Yes." "Did you tell him you wanted it?" "No." "Did you suggest it should reopen?" "Yes." The room changed by no visible measure. Grant's attorney leaned forward. "How many times?" "Once." "What did he say?" "That restaurants are graves dug with teaspoons." The court reporter paused for half a beat, then continued. "Did you disagree?" "Yes." "Did you tell him you could reopen Bell's?" "No." "Did you tell him you were capable of operating a restaurant?" "No." "Did you discuss your mother's failed catering business?" "Yes." "And your financial difficulties?" He saw my shoes. "Please answer the question." "Yes." Celia's pen moved for the first time. She wrote one word, then drew a line through it. The attorney asked about Elias's health, the bruise on his hand, the weeks he disappeared, the late meals. Nora answered until 8 months of Sundays sounded like a scheme assembled from coffee refills. "Describe your final conversation," he said. Nora looked at her attorney. "You may answer," she said. "He didn't like his eggs." Grant's attorney waited. "I told him he used disappointment to keep people away." "Did you argue?" "Yes." "Did he appear upset?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "That I knew nothing about his family." Celia stopped writing, and then he left. "Did you see him again?" "No." Nora's voice broke on the smallest word in the room. She looked down at her hands. Grant's attorney shuffled his papers. When he spoke again, his tone was quieter. No further questions at this time. Outside the office, Nora waited for the elevator with Celia and Grant. No one spoke until the doors opened and an elderly man inside waved them forward. Grant said, "We'll take the next one." The doors closed. "You saved the coins?" Celia asked. "Yes." "All of them?" "I spent some before I started." Grant stared at the carpet. "He told us you made him eggs. That was my job." "He said you made them wrong. That was his hobby." A laugh escaped Grant before he could stop it. He pressed his lips together. Celia did not laugh. "Why didn't you call him after the fight?" "I threw away his number the first night." "You could have found him." "I did find his address." "Then why didn't you go?" "Because I thought he'd come back." Celia's face closed. The elevator returned. Nora stepped inside alone. Before the doors shut, Grant said, "The offer still stands." Nora pressed the lobby button. "Then it can keep standing." Bell's gained 3 regular customers and lost money every week. Walter, a retired mail carrier, ordered a turkey melt and removed the turkey. Sandra, the lamp woman, tried to trade the lamp for coffee until Nora explained that the cafe was not becoming a barter economy. Leonard Pace came once. inspected the refrigerator he had located, and paid full price for soup while complaining about the portion. You said overlap ingredients, Nora told him, not starve people. You'll starve yourself first. He was not wrong. The apple cake sold, the turkey spoiled. Soup did well on rainy nights and badly when the weather cleared. The toaster burned every fifth sandwich, which Theo ate as quality control. Grant began appearing on Saturdays near closing. He never ordered. He stood behind the counter with the daily sales sheets and rearranged Nora's columns. What's wrong with my system? You record purchases by receipt date. That's when I purchase them. You need usage cost. I use what I purchase, not in the same week. Food doesn't understand weeks. Accounting does. You're welcome to leave. He stayed. Grant built a spreadsheet on Nora's old laptop, swore at the cafe's weak internet, and entered every purchase from her paper bag of receipts. When the numbers showed her losing more on turkey melts than she charged, he did not say he had warned her. He raised the price by 75 cents. Nora lowered it by a quarter. He noticed the next day. Their compromise became 50 cents. Celia watched them with suspicion, as though reconciliation might be another way of excluding her. She began working the register on Fridays. She told customers it was temporary and corrected Nora whenever Nora introduced her as staff. Staff gets paid, Celia said. Theo gets roles. Theo has negotiated better terms. The challenge remained active. That contradiction stretched until a Thursday storm broke it. Nora woke at 2:12 to water striking the bedroom floor, not tapping. Striking. She ran into the kitchen and found a stream pouring from the ceiling above the sink. Rain had pushed through the roof and traveled inside the wall. The yellow vine wallpaper had swollen into wet blisters. Downstairs, water fell through the office ceiling onto the file cabinets. Nora called Theo. His phone went to voicemail. She called the roofer, whose emergency line suggested leaving a message. She called Celia without thinking. Celia answered on the third ring. What happened? How do you know something happened? You called me. The roof. Celia arrived in pajama pants beneath her raincoat, carrying tarps, buckets, and a flashlight powerful enough to interrogate the moon. They covered the binders first. Water had already reached one box of vendor records. Celia carried it to the dining room, while Nora climbed into the apartment, crawlspace with the tarp. Do not go onto the roof, Celia shouted. I'm not. You're thinking about it. I'm thinking about murdering the roof. A section of wet wallpaper peeled away behind Nora and slapped onto the floor. By 4, the leak had slowed, but water filled the wall cavity. The wallpaper had to come down before the plaster beneath it molded. Celia scored the damp seams with a butter knife. Nora pulled. A long sheet released with a sound like tearing cloth. Behind the yellow vines was older wallpaper printed with tiny green bells. Celia sat back on her heels. Mom chose that. She chose both? Dad hated the bells. Maybe that's why he covered them. No. He hung the vines for her birthday. They stripped wallpaper until dawn, passing the butter knife back and forth. The room looked wounded, bare plaster exposed in irregular shapes. Nora's phone rang at 4:20. Maribel. Nora stared at the screen. You're supposed to be at work, Celia said. I know. She answered and explained the leak. Maribel listened without interrupting. This is your third late call in 2 weeks. The other 2 were 15 minutes. They delayed production. I can come now. No. You've been awake all night, and you work around ovens. I need the job. I need someone present at 4. Maribel, I'm sorry, Nora. The call ended. Celia kept her eyes on the wall. I can cover whatever you lose this week. No. It isn't charity. Yes, it is. It's my family's roof. And according to your petition, it shouldn't be over my head. Celia dropped the strip of wallpaper in her hand. That's not fair. Nora laughed, exhausted. Which part of this has been? They did not speak for the next hour. At 7, Theo arrived with coffee and a blue tarp he had been storing, since before blue tarps got thin. Grant followed with a roofer who agreed to patch the worst section, but warned that the entire rear slope needed replacement. Nora went downstairs to make room in the office and found water running from beneath the pantry door. The roof leak had soaked the top shelf, collapsing 2 cardboard boxes. Flour covered the floor in wet gray clumps. Sugar had dissolved into syrup. A case of paper liners sagged against the wall, red checks bleeding pink through the water. The dry goods she had bought for the next 3 weeks were ruined. Nora stood in the doorway. Behind her, everyone went quiet. No, she said. When Grant took one step forward, she lifted the soaked flour bag. It split in her hands and dropped onto her shoes. I said no. Nobody moved. Nora looked at the ruined sugar, the wet records, the bare apartment wall, and the cafe that had taken her job before it had learned to pay her. Bring me the release, she told Grant. Celia inhaled sharply. Nora wiped flour from her hands onto her shirt. 5,000, 7,500, whatever version is still standing. Bring it before I change my mind. Grant did not look relieved. That was the worst part. He looked like Elias, standing outside Bell's with a key he could not force himself to use. Grant did not bring the release. He brought a broom. Nora was on her knees scooping wet flour into a trash bag when he returned from speaking with the roofer. He set the broom against the pantry wall and looked at the gray paste coating her shoes. I need the release, not cleaning supplies. It has to come from the attorney. You had 3 offers ready when I didn't want one. They weren't formal. You called me at work. That was informal pressure. Is that a legal term? No. Then go be informally useful somewhere else. Grant picked up the broom. Nora stood. I mean it. So do I. He swept the flour toward himself. The wet bristles left clean stripes on the tile. Grant, the roofer can patch the rear slope today. Insurance may cover the new storm damage, not the underlying deterioration. I can't pay the difference. I know. I lost my job. I heard. The dry goods are gone. I'm standing in them, and I'm done. Grant kept sweeping. I heard that too. Nora grabbed the broom handle. Grant held on. For a moment, they stood in wet flour, fighting over a broom like 2 people who had run out of more dignified weapons. Why aren't you happy? Nora asked. Who says I'm not? Your face. My face doesn't perform on request. Another Bell family service failure. He let go of the broom. Nora nearly fell backward. She caught herself against the shelf, smearing flour along her sleeve. Grant rubbed both hands over his face. I thought you'd take the first offer. So did I. I thought we'd get the building back. Celia would have proof Dad couldn't give Mom away, and then we'd sell it after she was ready. Would she ever be ready? No. The answer contained years. Grant sat on an overturned bucket. I challenged the will because the whole thing felt like one final insult. Mom was dead. Celia had spent 6 years asking Dad to do something, anything, and he waited until he died to hand the choice to somebody else. I know. No, you know the clean version. Celia took him groceries. She drove him to appointments. He complained that she bought the wrong bread, chose the wrong route, talked too much in waiting rooms. Then he told Martin he had no family helping him. Nora looked at the flour between her shoes. He didn't tell me that. He wouldn't. It makes him look bad. He was comfortable with that. Only on his terms. Grant stood and took the broom again. I'll call the attorney. Thank you. He nodded without meeting her eyes. It sounded nothing like victory. Celia did not return that day. Theo and Grant moved the dry records into the dining room. Darla arrived with a shop vacuum that could suck up water, nails, and, according to her, one complete sock. The roofer covered the rear slope with Theo's heavy tarp and installed a temporary patch before dark. Nora threw out the soup. The refrigerator still worked, but the cafe no longer felt open. She turned the sign to "Not Open" and covered the apple cake with a dish towel so she would not have to watch it revolve. At 9, Grant left after writing the emergency repair costs into the spreadsheet. Theo stayed until the final inning. Darla took the wet aprons home to wash. Everyone left Nora with a building she had already agreed to surrender. She carried Elias's toolbox upstairs. Rain ticked softly against the tarp. The bare plaster where she and Celia had stripped wallpaper had dried in streaks, exposing patches of tiny green bells beneath the yellow vines. Nora sat on the mattress with the white envelope from Martin's office. The brass key had not been inside it since the day she crossed the street. She kept the envelope anyway, along with the petition, the estimates, the inspection approvals, and every bill that proved a gift could demand payment. She took the note from between the papers. Coffee's still poor. Sunday, 10:30. Elias had never seen it. That fact had once felt like tragedy. Now it felt like the purest thing about him. Nora had apologized. He had been unreachable. Everything afterward had been people mistaking his silence for an instruction. The settlement agreement arrived by email the next afternoon. $7,500, less Nora's remaining legal fees. She would release any claim to Bell's Cafe and vacate the property within 30 days. Celia and Grant would withdraw their challenge after the release was filed. Each side would bear its own costs. Nora's attorney said the terms were reasonable. Reasonable would pay the deposit on another room. Reasonable would replace her ruined shoes. Reasonable would leave her with enough money to look for work without waking at 3:15 to shape someone else's roles. Nora printed the agreement at the public library. The signature line looked enormous. She carried the pages back to Bell's and placed them on the polished counter. No customers knocked. The "Not Open" sign no longer attracted questions. Celia came in shortly before 6. She carried a brown accordion file under one arm. Her face looked pale and unfinished, as though she had not slept. Grant said, "You accepted. I'm signing tonight." "No." Nora waited. Celia set the file on the counter. Its paper edges were softened from use. Handwritten tabs divided it by month. "I spent the night sorting Dad's receipts," she said. "Why?" "Martin sent financial records for the challenge. We were supposed to identify anything that showed confusion, unusual spending, gifts. Did he buy a yacht? He bought denture adhesive, canned pears, bus passes, and exactly one shirt. That sounds like him." Celia opened the October section. She placed a diner receipt on the counter. $4.86. Apple pie. Nora recognized Barry's handwriting at the top and her own printed initial beside the total. Celia placed another receipt beside it. Eggs, wheat toast, coffee, then another, soup, meatloaf, turkey on rye. "He kept these?" Nora asked. "He kept everything. Dad did accounts even after there was nothing to account for." The receipts continued across the counter in a line of Sundays. Nora touched the first one. That was the night he came in. October 13th. Freezing rain. He arrived at 10:49. Celia looked at her sharply. "How do you remember?" He pointed at the clock. Nora saw the diner again. Wet coat, weak coffee, $5 bill, 9 pennies and a nickel. Celia took something else from the file. Not a secret letter. A receipt from the county bus, dated the same day, purchased at the depot kiosk. "I went to his house on October 12th, she said. The day before. Nora waited. "He had a cardiology appointment that morning. I picked him up. He complained about my driving all the way there. At the clinic, he told the nurse I was his neighbor. That was cruel." "Yes." Celia aligned the bus receipt with the diner receipt. "Afterward, I brought him groceries. Wrong bread, wrong coffee, wrong pears. He said Mom would have known better. I told him Mom was dead and had been for 6 years, but he was still making me audition for her." Nora did not move. "I took Bell's key off my ring," Celia said. "The old key from before he changed the locks. I'd carried it all that time, even though it opened nothing. I left it on his kitchen table and told him I was finished being the daughter he called, only when something hurt." Her thumb moved across her knuckle again. "The next evening, he took a bus to the depot," she said. "Then he walked into your diner." Nora looked through the front window toward the old rail station. "He told me his car was across the road. He'd stopped driving after the tests. He lied. He did that when the truth embarrassed him." Why was he embarrassed? Because he was alone. The answer settled over the counter. Nora remembered how he had stood at the diner door, facing ice he could not safely cross, furious at needing a cab. He had not been a wandering stranger. He had gone to Bell's after Celia returned the useless key. Perhaps he stood outside with the working one in his pocket. Perhaps the rain drove him into the nearest light. A late customer because his daughter had finally stopped waiting. "He didn't choose me instead of you," Nora said. "I know." Celia's voice cracked. "He chose you after me. There's a difference. Not enough of one." "No." Celia laid out more receipts. Every Sunday, every meal. Some bore Elias's block letter notes about prices or tax. One had "meat loaf," 2 words written across the back. Nora laughed, then covered her mouth. Celia smiled through wet eyes. There he is. They stood over the small, ridiculous record of Elias's final months. "He told Grant about the door repair," Celia said. "He told him your pie was dishonest. He said you knew how to close a kitchen, but not when to leave one. That doesn't make sense." It made sense to Grant. Low standard. He also asked Martin to change the will in April. After I asked why he didn't reopen Bell's. Yes. Nora pulled her hand from the receipt. Celia saw it. "You didn't make him do this. I gave him the idea. You gave him an argument. Dad collected those. He knew I needed money. He left you a leaking building. He knew I was good at the work. Yes. You can't know that. Celia touched the receipts. He came back every week. So had she. Nora looked at the settlement agreement. He should have left it to you. He should have unlocked it when I asked. That too. He should have apologized to Grant. He should have told me he was afraid to walk into the kitchen. He should have done 100 things while alive instead of turning his will into one last locked door. Celia's anger rose, but it no longer aimed at Nora. Giving Bells to you was selfish, she said. He made you finish a conversation you didn't start. He made us fight you because he couldn't bear to fight honestly with us. Nora swallowed, then signing ends it. No, signing lets him do it again. Celia picked up the agreement and tore it through Nora's signature line. Nora stared at the two halves. You can't tear my legal documents. I'm withdrawing my challenge. Grant isn't. He will. You don't know that. I know my brother. The front door opened. Grant stood there, rein on his shoulders. His eyes moved from the receipts to the torn agreement. Celia called me, he said. I hadn't yet, Celia replied. You always call after deciding what I'll do. You usually do it. Grant came to the counter and read the first receipt. Then the second. He did not ask for the explanation. Celia had perhaps told him about October 12th years ago, or perhaps he had been the person she called afterward. He picked up the receipt marked meatloaf, 2 words. He mailed me a photograph of a sandwich once, Grant said. Why? Nora asked. To prove the mustard was uneven, was it? Yes. Grant put the receipt down. That's not the point. It was to him. They smiled, all 3 of them, and the smile was terrible. Grant looked at the torn settlement. If we withdraw, you still might fail, he told Nora. The roof won't care. Customers won't appear because Dad chose you. The numbers are still bad. I know. Do you? Not as a question. Grant exhaled. I sold the dishwasher, he said, and the slicer, 2 prep tables, the ice machine. Dad told Celia I stripped the place because I wanted it to fail. Theo told me about the water bill. I should have told her. Celia looked at him. You tried? No, I gave you numbers. That's not the same as telling you I was scared. The radio was off. Without it, the cafe held every word. Grant took the 2 halves of the agreement and tore them again. I'll tell the attorney in the morning, he said. Nora looked from him to Celia. Both of you? Both, Celia said. The relief did not feel like winning. It felt like a room after someone stopped shouting. Outside, the rain strengthened. A drop struck the stock pot near the window. Then another. Grant looked toward the ceiling. Temporary patch. Bell ingenuity, Nora said. Theo's face appeared at the glass. He held a fresh roll of blue tarp beneath one arm and pointed indignantly at the locked door. Nora turned the deadbolt. Theo entered, shook rain from his cap, and looked at the 3 of them around the receipts. Meeting? Funeral, Celia said. Grant lifted the broom. Nora switched on the pass light. It flickered, held, and sent a warm square into the kitchen. Then she turned the pie case back on. The shelves began another slow revolution, empty except for one covered piece of apple cake. This time, nobody counted. Theo looked at the single piece of apple cake revolving behind the glass. Stale? He asked. Emotionally, Nora said. He took it anyway. They spent the night moving everything dry toward the front of the cafe. Grant covered the office ceiling with plastic. Celia spread damp receipts across 3 tables and weighted their corners with sugar shakers. Theo climbed the apartment stairs every 20 minutes to inspect the tarp, as if his attention alone kept it attached. By morning, Grant had built a new page in Nora's spreadsheet. Roof patch, lost inventory, reduced reopening stock, minimum weekly sales. The last number stared at Nora from the screen. We've never made that, she said. You've been open 3 weeks. We've never made half. You were buying too much turkey. You raised the price. You lowered it. By a quarter. That quarter is why nations collapse. Celia looked up from the receipts. Can we postpone sibling practice until I've had coffee? Grant and Nora answered together. We're not siblings. Theo turned up the radio. The storm damage covered part of the roof repair. The part caused by 6 years of neglect belonged to Nora. The roofer agreed to replace the rear slope first and let her pay the remainder over 12 months, provided Grant stopped calling him every hour to discuss materials. He likes me, Grant said. He blocked your number, Nora replied. He respects persistence. He asked me if you had another hobby. Grant found a used electric griddle at a restaurant auction. Nora did not ask whether it had come from someone else's version of bells. He helped Theo install it beneath the section of hood that passed certification, then spent an entire afternoon leveling it because eggs slid toward the grease trap. You know this isn't a construction site, Nora said. Food has gravity. Accounting understand gravity? Yes, it's called overhead. He looked pleased with himself until Nora threw a dish towel at him. Bell's stayed closed for 9 days. Nora called Barry on the 2nd. I need shifts. Thought you contain multitudes. Multitudes have rent. You don't pay rent. Roofs are rent with weather. Barry gave her 2 closing shifts and behaved as though rehiring her was an administrative inconvenience rather than a favor. On her first night back, she found a fresh pot of coffee at 10:45. You're getting soft, she told him. It was an accident. Should I dump it? If you do, you're fired again. No, I'm not. Barry considered this. Finish your side work. Nora drank 1 cup in the back booth. The seat no longer felt empty in the same way. Elias's absence had spread beyond it, no longer contained by a table where he had complained about eggs. It lived in the thermos behind the register, in the repaired door hinge, in a cafe roof she now owed money on. Barry slid a plate of apple pie in front of her. Crust's not yours, he said, filling, mostly dishonest. Nora ate every crumb. The family challenge ended in Martin Keene's office without a courtroom, raised voices, or anyone admitting they had expected more ceremony. Celia and Grant signed the withdrawal. Nora signed acceptance of the property and acknowledged the expenses attached to it. Martin handed her a stack of documents, then the cracked green tag with the brass key. You already have this, he said. I know. Then why was it in my file? Nora looked at Celia. Celia shrugged. I made a copy for the insurance inspector and returned the original to Martin. There are easier ways to distribute keys, Martin said. Not in this family, Grant replied. Outside, the 3 of them stood beneath the awning while Martin locked his office for lunch. The loose corner above Bell's lifted in the wind. Grant tucked his copy of the withdrawal into his coat. You should replace that before it kills someone. It's on the list. What number? After the roof. Before decorative yachts. You joke, but signage affects customer perception. Customers perceive the building. They drive past it every day. Celia stared at the green tag key in Nora's hand. Nora held it out. Celia stepped back. It's yours. The building is mine. The key opens a door. I don't want pity access. Good, because this comes with unpaid shifts. Grant smiled. Celia did not. You don't owe me a key. No. Elias did. That reached her. Nora kept her hand extended. I'm not giving you his apology. It wouldn't fit on the ring. Celia took the key. The cracked green tag rested against her glove. Her thumb moved across the stamped word, bells. I'll have copies made, Nora said. Grant can get one too. I know how locks work, Grant said. Based on your father's history, I wasn't sure. Celia closed her fingers around the key. Sunday evenings. Until you find someone. Staff gets paid. Not if the business doesn't make money. Then we're not staff. We're hostages. That sounds more accurate. They crossed the street together. Bell's reopened with less food. The turkey melt disappeared. Leonard approved. The grilled cheese disappeared. Theo objected, then continued eating burned toast without charge. Nora served Ruth's chicken soup, bean soup on Mondays, 1 hot sandwich on rye, and her mother's apple cake. She called Arizona for the cake recipe. Her mother answered on the 5th ring, voice thick with sleep and dessert distance. You know the recipe. I know what I changed. You changed too much cinnamon. Nora smiled into the phone. Apparently. What are you baking for? Nora looked around the apartment kitchen. The bare plaster had been sealed but not repapered. Tiny green bells showed through one preserved rectangle Celia refused to cover. The cafe. Silence. The cafe you inherited from that customer? Yes. The one with the lawsuit and the roof? That description lacks warmth. It has accuracy. Nora told her about the 4-item menu, the slow nights, and Maribel firing her. She did not mention sleeping in flour or accepting diner shifts because her mother could make worry cross 3 time zones. When Nora finished, her mother said, Use half brown sugar. You always used white because brown costs more. So why now? Because you're charging for it. Nora laughed. Her mother gave her the recipe she had been making for years, except for the parts she had forgotten, denied, or once been too broke to include. Brown sugar, melted butter instead of oil, lemon peel rubbed into the cinnamon before mixing. Mom? What? I'm sorry I couldn't save ours. The line stayed quiet. You closed every account, her mother said. You finished every paid job. You sold the van to make payroll. It wasn't enough. No, it wasn't. Nora waited for comfort. Her mother had never been good at giving what was expected. Then she said, that doesn't make it nothing. The next apple cake sold out. Bell's did not become successful all at once. It became less unsuccessful in measurable increments. 9 customers became 14. 14 became 22 on a rainy Friday when Ruth's soup filled the room with pepper and roasted chicken. Walter continued removing turkey from a sandwich no longer containing turkey until Nora asked what he thought he was doing. Habit, he said. Sandra brought a shade for the lamp and plugged it in beside the register. It cast warm yellow light across the counter, improving nothing operational and making everything look intentional. Darla's basil finally appeared in bean soup. Leonard called this a crime and finished the bowl. Theo bought a radio with the quarters Ruth had kept in the baking powder tin. The new radio was actually older than the one from his garage, but its dial glowed green and received baseball games without being struck. Progress, Theo said. The first week Bell's covered ingredients and utilities. Grant printed the sales report and taped it above the prep table. Nora moved it to the office. He moved it back. Customers can see that. Customers like solvency. They don't want to know how close dinner came to not existing. They should respect the risk. Celia taped a menu over the report. Grant redesigned the menu to include the weekly numbers in a font so small only he could recognize them. Their arguments changed shape. They concerned bread counts, closing duties, and whether soup labeled Thursday could be served Friday. They ended because someone had to refill coffee. No one left with a key on the table. Celia worked Sunday evenings. After 6 Sundays, Nora posted a help wanted sign. Celia removed it. You told me this was temporary, Nora said. It is. Then why remove the sign? The lettering was crooked. Grant printed it. Exactly. She continued working Sundays. Grant rebuilt the ordering system around Leonard's overlapping ingredients. He insisted he was consulting, not managing, and submitted imaginary invoices Nora stored in an envelope marked Delusions. Theo fixed the rocking stool by replacing a warped floor pad beneath it. The stool rocked in the opposite direction afterward. Better, he said. It still rocks. Different problem. Nora kept it that way. She paid the roofer every month. She paid Leonard in cash. She paid Theo in rolls until the first profitable week, when she put his name on payroll for 8 hours. He stared at the check. This is wrong. You worked 32. Then it's very wrong. We can afford 8. Theo folded the check into his shirt pocket. 8's right. Nora did not become less afraid of failure. She became more specific about it. She feared Thursday waste, the water heater's new rattle, and Grant saying cash flow with his serious face. Specific fears could be written on a list. Some could be paid. Some could be patched. Some only required a stock pot placed beneath the right drip. The apartment became a home by accident. Barry and Theo retrieved Nora's bed from above the tire shop after Mr. Larkin finally waived the stair fee in exchange for Barry threatening to describe it on local radio. Celia found a kitchen table at an estate sale. Grant complained that it was too large, then cut 1 inch from each side so it fit beneath the window. The cereal bowl of Elias's coins remained on the sill. Nora never counted them again. The first snow arrived on a Sunday evening. It began as thin white lines in the street lamps and thickened until the old depot vanished behind it. Customers left early. Walter wrapped half a sandwich for later. Sandra unplugged her lamp because she did not trust weather. Theo predicted 6 inches based on his left ankle and went home before his right one offered a second opinion. At 8:30, Celia locked the front door. Nora scraped the griddle, emptied the soup warmer, and wrapped the last 2 pieces of apple cake. The cafe settled around them. Green light from Theo's radio dial. Soft, ticking from the kitchen clock, now repaired, but still prone to hurrying. Snow brushing the windows. Celia counted the register. 23 cents off, she said. Grant took coffee. He entered it. Theo took a roll. He entered that too. Maybe your math is wrong. Celia looked offended. My math was never wrong. Your soup yield was. That was handwriting. Someone knocked on the door. Nora and Celia looked up. A woman stood beneath the awning in blue scrubs and a winter coat, snow melting in her dark hair. She pointed at the hours. The sign said 9. The clock said 8:52. Celia closed her eyes briefly. Nora went to the door. "I know you're closing," the woman said as soon as Nora unlocked it. "My bus got rerouted. I just need somewhere warm until the next one." The county bus shelter across the road was already buried along one side. "Come in," Nora said. "I don't want to make you cook." "Good." Celia gave Nora a look. The woman sat in the back booth because late customers always chose the farthest one. She held her hands around the coffee mug Nora brought and apologized twice for dripping on the floor. "The kitchen's done," Nora told her. "We have apple cake." "That sounds perfect." Nora uncovered the last 2 slices. The cake was still good, but the woman's hands shook when she lifted the fork. Cold, Nora thought. Or something private. "You eat dinner?" she asked. The woman glanced toward the dark kitchen. "I had crackers around 3. Nora looked at Celia. Celia looked at the clean griddle. For a moment, Elias stood between them without being invited. Wet coat, folded wallet, 14 cents, a door saying 11. Celia took off her navy cardigan and hung it beside the register. "Dry eggs?" she asked. "Not if we want her to enjoy them." "Wheat toast?" "One bread," Nora said. They went into the kitchen. Nora turned the griddle back on. Celia pulled Ruth's soup from the refrigerator, while Nora took eggs from beneath the counter. Above the pass, the handwritten menu listed a plate they served only after 8. 2 eggs, rye toast, coffee, and whatever complaint came with it. Elias's late plate. Nora cracked the eggs. Behind her, Celia switched on the pie case. The remaining slice of apple cake began one slow circle through the warm light. The woman in the back booth watched the snow and held her coffee with both hands. When Nora carried out the plate, she set it down without a check. "You didn't have to do this," the woman said. "No," Nora replied. From the kitchen, Celia called, "Door says 9. Nora looked at the clock. Then she slid into the booth across from the late customer while the snow covered the road and waited with her for the bus.